At 2:14 p.m., the entire system of Vantage systems collapsed without warning. Scarlett Vale, a 30-year-old billionaire CEO, watched her empire crumble just weeks after she took control. Deep inside the broken code, engineers found a hidden signature, 3 letters leading to a name that had been erased: Lucas Reed, a 32-year-old single father who had quietly built the entire system, then was fired like he never existed. This is the story of the man they tried to forget, and the woman who risked everything to uncover the truth. Stay until the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this story reaches. Now, let's begin. The coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, but Scarlett Vale hadn't noticed. She sat in the corner office on the 42nd floor of Vantage Systems, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed downtown Seattle like a postcard. Rain streaked the glass in thin, erratic lines. The city below looked small, manageable, controllable. Nothing like what was happening inside this building. "Miss Vale?" The voice belonged to David Chen, the company's CTO. He stood in the doorway, tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. His face had the tight, sleepless look of someone who'd been living on panic and instant coffee for the past 72 hours. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled, tie loosened, the professional veneer cracking at the edges. Scarlett turned from the window. "Tell me something I don't already know, David." He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "The backup servers are down. All of them." "All of them?" "Every single one? Primary, secondary, tertiary. It's like someone flipped a switch and everything just stopped." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "We've never seen anything like this. The redundancies should have kicked in. The fail-safes should have prevented a total collapse. But nothing worked. It's like the entire infrastructure just gave up." Scarlett stood, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she crossed to her desk. The sound echoed in the vast office, too big, too impersonal, still decorated with her father's taste rather than her own. She'd been CEO of Vantage Systems for exactly 19 days. 19 days since her father's sudden death from a heart attack had thrust her into a position she'd spent years preparing for but never actually wanted. 19 days of boardroom politics, hostile executives who resented her age and her gender, and a company culture that felt more like a minefield than a tech empire. And now this. How many users are affected? She kept her voice steady, controlled. The voice she'd practiced in front of mirrors during business school. The voice that said she belonged here, even when she felt like an imposter. David swallowed hard. Approximately 4.2 million. The number hung in the air between them like a guillotine blade. Vantage Systems provided cloud infrastructure for hospitals, financial institutions, government agencies, emergency services. 4.2 million users meant millions more affected downstream. Medical records inaccessible. Financial transactions frozen. Emergency dispatch systems crippled. Lives hanging in the balance because of code that had stopped working. "Where's the engineering team?" "Conference room B. They've been there since 2 a.m. David glanced at his watch. "That's almost 10 hours straight. Some of them are starting to lose it." Marcus threw his laptop across the room an hour ago. Sarah's been crying in the bathroom, and Jenkins just keeps saying, "This is impossible," over and over like a mantra. Scarlett grabbed her phone and headed for the door. David fell into step beside her, his shorter legs working double time to match her stride. The hallways of the executive floor were eerily quiet. Most of the senior leadership had made themselves scarce once the crisis hit. Typical. They'd show up later to assign blame and protect their own positions, but right now, when actual work needed to be done, they were nowhere to be found. "There's something else," David said quietly as they waited for the elevator. She didn't look at him. "What?" "They found something in the code, a signature, embedded deep in the core infrastructure." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Scarlett pressed the button for the 23rd floor where the engineering teams worked. "What kind of signature?" "Initials LRE." David's reflection in the polished elevator doors looked troubled. "The team thinks it stands for Lucas Reed." Scarlett stopped so suddenly that David nearly collided with her. The elevator continued its descent, the floor numbers ticking down on the digital display above the doors. "LRE? Yeah, it's woven throughout the foundational code. Not like graffiti or vandalism, more like an artist signing their work. The team says it's elegant, actually, subtle. You'd never notice it unless you were looking for it. The name meant nothing to her. She'd memorized hundreds of employee files in the past 3 weeks, cross-referencing names with faces and positions, trying to understand the complex web of relationships and politics that govern Vantage systems. But Lucas Reed wasn't one of them. Who is that? David's expression shifted into something uncomfortable. He looked away, studying the elevator's control panel with intense focus. He used to work here. Systems architect, senior level. He was let go about 8 months ago. The elevator reached the 23rd floor. The doors opened onto a scene of controlled chaos. Engineers rushing between workstations, voices raised in technical arguments, the smell of stale coffee and accumulated stress thick in the air. Let go or fired? David led her down the corridor toward conference room B. Fired. Scarlett's instincts prickled. She'd learned early in her business career that the language people used mattered. Let go implied a mutual parting, maybe even some severance and goodwill. Fired was something else entirely. Why? I don't know the details. Before my time. David paused outside the conference room door. Through the glass walls, Scarlett could see the engineering team hunched over laptops, faces illuminated by screen light, looking like survivors of some technical apocalypse. But from what I've heard, it wasn't pretty. There was shouting. Security had to escort him out. Hammond was involved. Hammond. Gerald Hammond, the VP of Operations. The man who'd been running Vantage Systems in the months between her father's death and her appointment as CEO. The man who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. The man Scarlett instinctively distrusted but couldn't quite pin down why. She filed that information away and pushed open the conference room door. Conference room B was a disaster zone. Laptops covered every surface, power cables and Ethernet cords tangled across the floor like technical intestines. Whiteboards were filled with incomprehensible diagrams, flowcharts, and crossed-out theories written in different colors of marker. Empty energy drink cans formed small pyramids on the windowsills. The air was stale, thick with the smell of exhaustion and desperation. The engineering team, 12 exhausted, disheveled people who looked like they'd aged 5 years in the past 12 hours, barely glanced up when Scarlett entered. A few nodded acknowledgement. Most just kept staring at their screens, fingers flying across keyboards, searching for solutions that refused to appear. "Talk to me," Scarlett said, pulling out a chair at the head of the table, but not sitting. She wanted to be at their level, not above them. These people were fighting to save the company. The least she could do was stand with them. Marcus Wu, the lead systems engineer, looked up from his laptop. He was 38, brilliant, and normally unflappable. Right now he looked like he was one system error away from a complete breakdown. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking slightly as he gestured at the screen. "We've been trying to trace the point of failure. Everything keeps leading back to the core infrastructure layer, the foundational code that the entire system runs on. It's like trying to find the first domino in a chain reaction that's already knocked down the entire row." "And?" Scarlett moved closer, looking at the screen even though the code meant nothing to her. She'd studied business and management, not computer science. But she'd learned that sometimes people just needed someone to witness their struggle. "And it's failing because someone designed it to fail if certain conditions weren't met." Marcus's voice was strained, frustrated. "But here's the thing, it's not malicious code. There's no virus, no hack, no sabotage in the traditional sense. It's more like a fail-safe that's been triggered." "Explain that." Marcus rubbed his face, leaving red marks on his pale skin. The system was built with dependencies that require regular maintenance and updates. Without those updates, the whole thing eventually collapses under its own weight, like a bridge that needs constant reinforcement, or it starts to buckle. Sarah Park, one of the senior developers, looked up from her station. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged. "It's actually brilliant design if you think about it from a purely technical perspective. The system is self-aware enough to know when it's not being properly maintained. Instead of limping along and potentially causing data corruption or security vulnerabilities, it just stops. Clean shutdown. Minimal damage. Except for the 4 million people who can't access their data," Scarlett pointed out. "Right, except for that." Sarah's laugh was hollow, bordering on hysterical. She pressed her palms against her eyes. "Sorry, I'm not handling this well." "None of us are," Marcus said. He turned back to Scarlett. The problem is that the maintenance protocols are incredibly specific. They're not standard procedures we can just look up in a textbook. They're custom built for this exact system architecture. So why didn't anyone maintain it? The room went quiet. Engineers exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Outside the glass walls, other employees walked past, pretending not to stare at the crisis team that held the company's fate in their exhausted hands. Because, Marcus said slowly, choosing his words carefully, the only person who fully understood how it worked was Lucas Reed. And when he left, that knowledge went with him. Scarlett pulled out a chair and sat down, not at the head of the table, but in the middle, next to Marcus. Explain it to me like I'm not a software engineer, because I'm not. Marcus took a breath, clearly trying to find the right analogy. Imagine you build a house with a unique foundation, one that requires specific adjustments every few months, or it starts to crack. These aren't adjustments that any contractor can make. They're based on the specific soil composition, the water table, the settling patterns. You're the only architect who knows exactly how those adjustments work, because you designed them based on years of studying that particular plot of land. He paused, taking a sip from a coffee cup that had to be hours old. Then one day, you're forced out. The new owners don't understand the foundation. They hire other contractors who look at it and say, "This seems fine, we'll just do standard maintenance." But standard maintenance doesn't work. The cracks start small, then they get bigger, and eventually the whole house collapses. So this Lucas Reed built a system that only he could maintain? Scarlett felt a flicker of anger. That seemed like professional negligence at best, deliberate sabotage at worst. Not intentionally, Sarah interjected quickly, defensively. From what we can tell, he documented everything, detailed specifications, maintenance protocols, update schedules. The documentation we found is incredibly thorough. Too thorough, actually. It's like he knew something would go wrong and wanted to make sure someone could fix it. Scarlett leaned forward. Then why isn't anyone using this documentation? Because after he was fired, someone archived all of it. Sarah's voice dropped. Buried it so deep in the company server that we only found it this morning. At 4 a.m., I was doing a system-wide search for anything related to infrastructure maintenance, and it finally popped up. Buried under 17 layers of subdirectories labeled as deprecated legacy files. The anger that had been simmering in Scarlett's chest flared hotter. Who archived it? Sarah hesitated, glancing at Marcus, then at David, then back at her laptop screen. We're still trying to figure that out. The metadata has been scrubbed. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide their tracks. Best guess. Someone with executive-level access. Marcus met Scarlett's eyes. And the technical knowledge to cover their digital footprint. That's a pretty small pool of people. The implication settled over the room like ash. Scarlett felt the weight of it, the ugly reality that someone in a position of power had deliberately sabotaged the company's infrastructure. Not through malice, perhaps, but through negligence and pride, and the petty vengeance of people who couldn't stand being challenged. She stood, pacing to the whiteboard covered in technical diagrams. She stared at the incomprehensible strings of code and flowcharts, feeling the weight of 4.2 million users pressing down on her shoulders. Behind her, she could hear the soft clicking of keyboards, the occasional muttered curse, the sound of people fighting a losing battle. Can we fix it without him? Marcus rubbed his face, leaving his hair standing in wild angles. He looked like he wanted to lie, to offer reassurance, but he was too tired and too honest. Maybe, eventually. But we're talking weeks, possibly months, to fully reverse engineer his work. And that's assuming we don't make it worse in the process. We could accidentally trigger other fail-safes we don't know about. We could introduce new vulnerabilities. This isn't like fixing a broken pipe. It's more like performing surgery on someone's brain when we only have a basic anatomy textbook. We don't have weeks. We have hours before this becomes a national news story and a legal nightmare. Scarlett turned to face the team. Someone from Bloomberg already called my assistant. CNN is setting up cameras in the lobby. The board is losing their minds. And I've got patients in hospitals who can't access their medical records and banks that can't process transactions. I know. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Believe me, I know. The room fell into heavy silence. Someone's phone buzzed. A laptop fan whirred loudly, struggling to cool an overworked processor. Outside, Seattle continued its rainy afternoon, oblivious to the crisis unfolding on the 23rd floor of a glass tower. Scarlett made a decision. Find Lucas Reed. I don't care if he's in Tibet or Antarctica or living off the grid in a bunker somewhere. Find him and get him on the phone. Already tried, David said from his position near the door. His phone's disconnected. The number in his HR file just goes to a recording saying the subscriber is no longer available. His last known address is a rental in Fremont, but the landlord says he moved out 6 months ago. No forwarding information, no contact details. Social media? Nothing. No Facebook, no LinkedIn, no Twitter, no Instagram. The guy's a ghost. His digital footprint just ends about 7 months ago. Scarlett's mind raced. People didn't just disappear. Not in the digital age. Not unless they wanted to. Not unless they had a reason to erase themselves. What about family, friends, former colleagues? We're working on it, David said. But so far, nothing. Reed kept to himself, didn't socialize much with the other engineers. A few people remember him being intense, focused, a little standoffish. He'd show up, do his work, and leave. Didn't attend company parties or happy hours. Didn't play on the softball team, just kept his head down and wrote code. There has to be something, Scarlett insisted. Employment records, emergency contacts, tax returns, bank accounts. You can't exist in modern society without leaving traces. Sarah looked up from her laptop, her expression shifting. There is one thing. His HR file mentions a dependent, a daughter. Scarlett's pulse quickened. Name? Emma Reed, age 7. There's a copy of her birth certificate in his employee file. He needed it for health insurance. Mother is listed as deceased. Date of death is about 3 years ago. So he was a widower, single father, raising a 7-year-old alone while building the infrastructure of a billion-dollar company. The picture of Lucas Reed was starting to come into focus, and it wasn't what Scarlett had expected. A 7-year-old means school records, she said, thinking out loud. Pediatrician visits. Probably play dates and extracurricular activities, utility bills in his name, grocery store loyalty cards. He can't be completely invisible. David nodded, already pulling out his phone. I'll get someone on it. Should take a few hours to... No. Scarlett grabbed her coat from the back of a chair. I'll do it myself. The room stared at her. 12 exhausted engineers and 1 bewildered CTO, all looking at her like she'd just announced she was going to Mars. Miss Vale, Marcus said carefully, diplomatically, with all due respect, you're the CEO of a company in the middle of a massive crisis. Shouldn't you be here managing the situation, talking to the board, handling the press, doing CEO things? The situation can't be managed without Lucas Reed, which means finding him is the single most important thing I can do right now. She looked at David. You're in charge until I get back. Keep the board calm, keep the press at bay, and for the love of everything, do not let anyone make this worse. No unauthorized statements, no promises we can't keep, no scapegoating. Just stick to the facts and buy me time. David opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. How much time do you need? As much as you can give me. Scarlett was halfway to the elevator when her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. VP Hammond wants to see you immediately. Says it's urgent. He's waiting in your office. She looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever Hammond wanted could wait. This couldn't. The address Sarah Park had pulled from Emma Reed's school enrollment records led Scarlett to a modest neighborhood in North Seattle, about 40 minutes from downtown when traffic was good. Today, traffic was terrible. She sat in her Tesla at a standstill on I-5, watching the rain hammer against the windshield, listening to a news report about the Vantage Systems outage on the radio, affecting millions of users across the country. Hospitals in 3 states report being unable to access patient records. The Federal Trade Commission has announced they'll be launching an investigation into whether Vantage Systems violated data protection regulations. She turned it off. By the time she reached North Seattle, it was after 4 p.m. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place where houses had been built in the 50s and 60s and lovingly maintained ever since. Small yards with tidy gardens, minivans in driveways, basketball hoops bolted above garage doors, leaves scattered across sidewalks, wet and matted from the rain. A kid in a yellow raincoat rode a bicycle past her car, bell jingling. A world away from the glass towers of downtown. A world away from the crisis that was consuming her life. The address led her to a pale blue bungalow with white trim and a porch that looked handmade, slightly crooked but sturdy. The lawn was mowed but not manicured, grass a little too long, a few weeds poking through near the fence. A child's bicycle leaned against the front steps, pink with white tires and streamers trailing from the handlebars. A flower pot sat on the porch railing containing something that might have been geraniums before the rain got to them. Scarlett parked at the curb and sat for a moment, watching the house. Lights were on inside. Through the front window she could see movement, someone walking past, maybe getting dinner ready or helping with homework. She took a breath, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and realized she looked exactly like what she was. A corporate executive in expensive clothes, completely out of place in this neighborhood. She briefly considered changing into something more casual, then dismissed the thought. Lucas Reed would either talk to her or he wouldn't. Her wardrobe wasn't going to change that. She got out of the car, smoothed her blazer, and walked to the front door. The porch steps creaked slightly under her weight. Up close, she could see that the porch swing was handmade, assembled from what looked like reclaimed wood, sanded smooth and stained a warm honey color. Someone had put real care into building it. She knocked 3 times, firm but not aggressive. Footsteps inside getting closer. A pause. Probably someone checking the peephole. Then the sound of a chain being engaged, and the door opened 6 inches, held by a security chain. The man on the other side was younger than she'd expected. Early 30s, with dark hair that needed a cut, and eyes that looked perpetually tired. He wore jeans with a worn knee and a faded t-shirt with a cartoon robot on it. Some children's show character she didn't recognize. Stubble shadowed his jaw. His hands, she noticed, had calluses on the fingertips. From typing, probably. Or maybe from building porch swings. "Can I help you?" His voice was flat, guarded, with the wary tone of someone who'd learned not to trust unexpected visitors. "Lucas Reed?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A tightening, a pulling back. "Who's asking?" "My name is Scarlett Vale. I'm the CEO of Vantage Systems." For a long moment, he just stared at her. His jaw clenched. His knuckles went white where he gripped the edge of the door. Then, without a word, he started to close it. Scarlett's hand shot out, stopping the door before it could shut completely. "Please, I need 5 minutes." "No, you don't." His voice was cold now, all the careful neutrality stripped away. "The system is down, all of it. 4 million users are affected. Hospitals can't access patient records. Banks can't process. Not my problem." "You built it. You're the only one who can fix it." Lucas's laugh was short and bitter, a sound that had no humor in it at all. "I built it, yeah. And then your company threw me out like garbage, erased my work, buried my documentation, pretended I never existed. So forgive me if I don't feel particularly motivated to help clean up the mess you made." "I wasn't CEO then. I didn't even work there." Scarlett kept her voice steady, reasonable. "My father ran the company until 3 weeks ago. I'm trying to fix the problems I inherited." "Doesn't matter." Lucas pushed against the door, but Scarlett held firm. "You're there now, which makes you part of the same machine, the same system that chews people up and spits them out when they're no longer useful." "I understand you're angry." "Do you?" His eyes flashed. "Do you understand what it's like to pour your life into something, to build something you're proud of, to create infrastructure that helps millions of people, and then have it stolen from you? To be escorted out by security like a criminal? To have your name scrubbed from every document, every acknowledgement, every piece of code you wrote?" Scarlett opened her mouth, then closed it. Because no, she didn't understand that. She'd never created anything, never built something from nothing. She'd inherited wealth and position. She'd been given opportunities because of her last name. And right now, standing on this porch arguing with a man who'd been genuinely wronged, she felt the full weight of that privilege. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't understand. But people are going to get hurt, not executives, not shareholders, regular people, the ones who depend on our infrastructure to live their lives, patients who need their medical records, parents trying to access their bank accounts, small businesses that run on our platform. You should have thought about that before you let your VP bury all my documentation and pretend I never existed." Scarlett blinked. "What? You didn't know?" Lucas's smile was cold, sharp-edged. "Of course you didn't. That's how it works, right? People like you stay clean while people like Hammond do the dirty work. You get to maintain plausible deniability while the rest of us get destroyed. I don't know what you're talking about. Scarlett's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. But if someone buried your documentation, I'll find out who and I'll deal with it. Right now, I need your help. Right now, Lucas said, glancing at his watch, I need to pick up my daughter from school, so unless you're planning to stand on my porch until the cops show up, I suggest you leave. I'll pay you. Name your price. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her. Not at the designer clothes or the perfect hair or the polished exterior that had been carefully crafted by personal stylists and media coaches, but at something underneath, something Scarlett wasn't sure she wanted anyone to see. I want you to leave me alone, he said quietly, with the kind of finality that felt like a door closing. I want to raise my kid in peace. I want to build her a treehouse and help her with her homework and make her breakfast without worrying that some corporation is going to come knocking and demand a piece of my soul. I want to never think about Vantage Systems or anyone associated with it ever again. He closed the door. The lock clicked into place. Scarlett stood on the porch, staring at the painted wood, her hand still raised from where she'd tried to stop him. Inside, she could hear movement, water running, the distant sound of a television, some children's program with bright voices and cheerful music. Normal life. The kind of life that had nothing to do with corporate crises or system failures or the weight of 4 million people depending on infrastructure that was crumbling. She pulled out her phone and called David. He answered on the first ring. Any progress? He won't help. Scarlett walked back to her car, the rain soaking through her blazer. Damn! What do we do now? Scarlett looked back at the pale blue bungalow. Through the window, she could see Lucas moving around inside, probably getting ready to pick up his daughter, living the quiet life he'd built after Vantage Systems had destroyed him. I don't know yet, she said, but I'm not giving up. She ended the call and sat in her car, rain drumming on the roof, and realized she'd just met the most honest person she'd encountered since becoming CEO, and he wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. By the time Scarlett returned to the office, the crisis had escalated from disaster to full-blown catastrophe. The lobby of Vantage Systems looked like a war zone. Reporters swarmed every entrance, cameras and microphones creating a forest of metal and plastic. Security guards were trying to maintain order, but it was a losing battle. Somewhere in the chaos, she caught a snippet of breaking news playing on someone's phone. Vantage Systems outage enters critical phase as CEO remains unavailable for comment, raising questions about leadership during this unprecedented crisis. She slipped through a side entrance that most people didn't know about, a service door near the loading docks that her father had shown her years ago when she was still a teenager. Every building has secret passages, he'd told her. Know them all, and you'll never be trapped. She took the service elevator to the executive floor, avoiding the reporters camping out in the main lobby. Her clothes were still damp from the rain. Her hair had lost whatever style it had started the day with. She probably looked like she'd been through a storm, which, she supposed, she had. The 42nd floor was chaos. Phones ringing, people rushing between offices, voices raised in arguments and panic. Her assistant, Jennifer, normally unflappable, looked like she was one crisis away from a breakdown. Oh, thank God, Jennifer said when she saw Scarlett. The board is freaking out. Hammond's been looking for you. The press team needs a statement. Legal wants to talk about liability, and your mother called 3 times. Scarlett held up a hand. One thing at a time. Where's the board meeting? Conference room A. They started without you. Of course they did. Scarlett straightened her blazer, ran her fingers through her damp hair, and walked into the boardroom like she owned it, which, technically, through inheritance and stock options, she partially did. The room fell silent when she entered. 15 executives in expensive suits, all looking varying degrees of angry, panicked, or calculating. At the head of the table sat Gerald Hammond, the VP of Operations, and the man who'd been running Vantage Systems in the months between her father's death and her appointment as CEO. He was 62, silver-haired, with the kind of smooth, authoritative presence that made people trust him instinctively. He wore his power like a comfortable suit, perfectly tailored, perfectly appropriate. Scarlett had never trusted him, not once. There was something in his eyes that never quite matched his smile, something calculating and cold beneath the professional warmth. There she is, Hammond said as Scarlett took a seat. His tone was pleasant, conversational, but his eyes were ice. We were beginning to worry. You've been unreachable for nearly 4 hours. I was handling the situation. By disappearing? Another board member, Richard Thornton, CFO, leaned forward. We've got a PR disaster on our hands. The stock is in freefall, and our CEO is MIA. I was finding the person who can fix this. The room quieted, attention sharpening. Lucas Reed, Scarlett said, watching faces carefully. Most looked confused. A few looked uncomfortable. Hammond's expression didn't change at all, which was somehow more damning than any reaction. Reed was fired months ago, Hammond said smoothly, as if commenting on the weather, for insubordination and failure to follow company protocols. Reed was fired, Scarlett corrected, her voice hard, after building the entire core infrastructure of this company. And when he left, someone made sure all his documentation disappeared, buried it so deep that my engineering team only found it this morning after searching for hours. That's a serious accusation. Hammond's tone remained pleasant, but something flickered in his eyes. It's a fact. My engineering team found the archived files. Someone with executive-level access deliberately buried documentation that was critical to maintaining our infrastructure. Hammond leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, what does it have to do with our current crisis? We need solutions, not blame. The current crisis exists because someone sabotaged Lucas Reed's work after firing him. The documentation he created would have prevented this. The maintenance protocols he established would have kept the system running. But someone decided that their ego was more important than the integrity of our infrastructure. Again, with the accusations. Hammond's smile was thin, sharp. You're new to this role, Scarlett. I understand you're under tremendous pressure, but launching a witch hunt in the middle of a crisis is not leadership. It's distraction. Then what would you suggest? Scarlett met his gaze and held it. I suggest you focus on the immediate problem. Let the engineers do their job. Give them the resources they need to fix the system without Reed. And stop chasing conspiracy theories that make you sound paranoid and unstable. The words hung in the air. Paranoid. Unstable. Classic corporate language for dismissing women in leadership positions. Scarlett felt the familiar anger rise in her chest, but she'd learned long ago not to show it. Men got to be passionate. Women got called emotional. The immediate problem, she said evenly, exists because someone in this room didn't want Lucas Reed to succeed. Someone wanted him gone badly enough to sabotage his work after he left. And until I know who and why, I'm not trusting anyone's advice. She stood, gathering her phone and her dignity. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. She walked out before Hammond could respond, before the other board members could pile on, before she said something she'd regret. Behind her, she could hear voices rising in argument, people choosing sides, the political machinery of corporate governance grinding into motion. Let them fight, she thought. She had bigger problems. At 11:47 p.m., Scarlett sat alone in her father's office, her office now, though it still didn't feel like hers, surrounded by personnel files and incident reports she'd pulled from the HR archives. She'd sent Jennifer home hours ago. The 42nd floor was empty, just her and the ghosts of corporate history. Lucas Reed's termination paperwork was a masterclass in corporate speak. Vague accusations of cultural misalignment and failure to embrace company values. No specific incidents, no documented warnings, just enough legal coverage to avoid a wrongful termination suit, but nothing that actually explained why a talented systems architect had been fired without notice. But between the lines, if you knew how to read this kind of document, the real story emerged. Reed had pushed back against a new data monetization strategy proposed by Hammond's division. He'd raised concerns about user privacy, about selling access to infrastructure analytics, about turning Vantage systems from a service provider into a surveillance tool. He'd written detailed memos outlining the security risks, the potential legal liabilities, the ethical implications. He'd been vocal, insistent, uncompromising, and 3 weeks later he'd been fired for cultural misalignment. Scarlett pulled up his employee emails, which IT had finally given her access to after she'd threatened to fire anyone who stood in her way. The picture that emerged was of someone deeply principled, maybe a little difficult, but ultimately trying to do the right thing. Email after email to Hammond, explaining technical concerns, offering solutions, warning about the consequences of poor maintenance. All of them polite but firm. All of them ignored. The last email, sent 2 days before his termination, was brief. Gerald, if we proceed with the data monetization plan without proper security audits and user consent protocols, we're not just risking legal action. We're betraying the trust of millions of people who depend on our infrastructure. I cannot and will not implement features that compromise user privacy. If this is a problem, we should discuss my future with the company. Lucas. Hammond's response, sent 6 hours later, was even briefer. Your concerns are noted. We'll discuss this in person. 2 days later, Lucas Reed was escorted out by security. Scarlett closed her eyes, feeling sick. She'd inherited more than just a company from her father. She'd inherited a legacy of corporate ruthlessness, dressed up as business as usual. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. You're making enemies you can't afford. She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it and blocked the number. Her computer pinged. An email from Sarah Park, time-stamped 11:52 p.m. Found something. You need to see this. Sending encrypted file. Scarlett called her immediately. Sarah answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted but alert. What is it? I was going through the archived files, Reed's documentation. Most of it is technical specifications, but there's a folder labeled Warnings. It's full of emails Reed sent to Hammond over a 6-month period. Detailed explanations of what would happen if the system wasn't maintained properly. Predictions of exactly what we're seeing now. It's like he knew this would happen. Hammond knew. Scarlett's voice was flat, certain, not just knew. Reed offered multiple solutions. He volunteered to create a transition plan, to train a replacement team, to document everything in excruciating detail so that anyone could maintain the system. Hammond refused every offer, and then he fired Reed 2 weeks after the last email. Send me everything. Already done. Check your encrypted email. Scarlett hung up and opened her secure email account. The files Sarah had sent were damning. Page after page of Lucas Reed trying to do the right thing, trying to protect the system he'd built, trying to ensure that millions of people wouldn't suffer because of corporate politics. And page after page of Gerald Hammond ignoring him, dismissing him, finally silencing him. There were other documents too. Internal memos about the data monetization strategy, revenue projections that depended on selling user data, legal opinions warning that the plan might violate privacy regulations, and a final memo from Hammond to the board dated 1 week after Reed's termination, announcing that the data monetization plan had been indefinitely postponed due to technical constraints. The technical constraints being that the one person who could implement it had refused and been fired. Scarlett's hands shook as she read, not from fear, from anger. Pure, white-hot anger at the casual cruelty of it all, at the way powerful men destroyed people's lives and careers to protect their own egos. Her phone rang. David Chen calling at midnight. Tell me you have good news, she said, though she could hear in his voice that he didn't. Sort of. The engineers found a workaround. It's not pretty, and it won't last long, but we can get about 60% of the system back online within the next few hours. That's something. Yeah, but Scarlett... He paused, and she could hear the exhaustion in the silence. It's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Without a real fix, we're looking at another collapse within days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. And this time, the recovery might not be possible. We could lose everything. I know. So what do we do? She looked at the evidence spread across her desk, at the proof of corruption and cowardice, at the documentation of a good man being destroyed for doing the right thing. We tell the truth, she said. What? Tomorrow morning, emergency press conference. We tell the world exactly what happened, who built the system, who fired him, who buried the documentation, all of it. Scarlett, that's... David's voice cracked. That's career suicide. The board will never support it. Hammond will destroy you. You'll be lucky if you last another week as CEO. I know. Then why? Because it's the right thing to do. She thought of Lucas Reed standing in his doorway with his faded robot t-shirt and calloused fingers, asking only to be left alone to raise his daughter in peace. And because someone needs to prove to Lucas Reed that not everyone in this company is corrupt. She hung up before David could argue. Then she spent the next 6 hours preparing a statement that would probably end her career. The emergency press conference was scheduled for 6 a.m. Scarlett hadn't slept. She'd spent the night reviewing evidence, crafting her statement, and ignoring increasingly hostile texts from Gerald Hammond demanding to know what she was planning. At 5:30 a.m., she stood in the bathroom of her office, staring at her reflection. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, skin pale with exhaustion, her hair still carrying a faint smell of rain from yesterday's trip to North Seattle. She thought about changing into a fresh suit, touching up her makeup, presenting the polished image that corporate communications would want. Instead, she just washed her face and went downstairs. At 5:45 a.m., she stood backstage at the Vantage Systems Media Center, watching Gerald Hammond work the room like he'd been doing for decades. Shaking hands with reporters, offering reassurances, playing the role of steady leadership in a crisis. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile warm and trustworthy. She wondered how many other people he'd destroyed to get where he was. At 5:58 a.m., David appeared at her elbow, looking as exhausted as she felt. "You sure about this?" "No. That's not comforting. It's honest." She looked at him. "If this goes badly, and it probably will, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. You tried to warn me. You did everything right." David's eyes widened. "Scarlett, what are you planning to say?" "The truth." The production assistant gave her a 2-minute warning. Scarlett straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. More cameras than she'd expected, more reporters, more attention than she was prepared for. The room was packed. Every major news outlet, tech bloggers, industry analysts, even some of their major clients sitting in the back rows with expressions ranging from worried to furious. She gripped the edges of the lectern and waited for the noise to die down. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice echoed through the room, amplified by speakers that made her sound more confident than she felt. At approximately 2:14 p.m. yesterday, Vantage Systems experienced a critical infrastructure failure affecting 4.2 million users. Our engineering team has been working around the clock to restore service, and I'm pleased to report that as of 3 hours ago, 60% of our systems are back online. Polite applause, a few camera flashes. She ignored it all. "However," she continued, gripping the lectern harder, "I'm not here to celebrate a partial recovery. I'm here to tell you why this happened, and to take full responsibility for it." The room went completely silent. 8 months ago, Vantage Systems employed a systems architect named Lucas Reed. Mr. Reed designed and built the core infrastructure that our entire platform runs on. He was meticulous, talented, and deeply committed to creating something that would serve millions of people reliably and securely. She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. Reporters leaning forward, pens poised over notepads. Cameras focused on her face, broadcasting this moment to millions. He was also fired, not for incompetence, not for misconduct, but because he refused to compromise his principles when asked to implement features that would have prioritized profit over user privacy. The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, camera flashes creating a strobe effect, voices overlapping in a cacophony of noise and confusion. Scarlett raised a hand. The noise continued for another 30 seconds before gradually dying down. After Mr. Reed's termination, all of his documentation, the detailed guides and maintenance protocols necessary to maintain the system he'd built, was deliberately archived by someone within our executive team. This sabotage, whether intentional or not, directly led to yesterday's collapse. She could see Hammond in the wings now, his face purple with rage, gesturing frantically at someone off camera, probably trying to get her pulled off stage, trying to stop this before she could finish. Too late. I have spent the past 12 hours reviewing evidence that proves Mr. Reed warned us this would happen. He offered solutions. He volunteered to ensure a smooth transition. All of his efforts were rejected, and when he persisted in raising concerns about user privacy and data security, he was fired. Who's responsible? A reporter in the front row stood up, microphone extended. Who made the decision to fire him? Scarlett looked directly at the camera. This was the moment, the point of no return. That's what I intend to find out, and when I do, they will be held accountable. Not with a quiet resignation or a generous severance package, but with full transparency and consequences. She stepped back from the podium. Miss Vale! Another reporter jumped to her feet. Are you saying Vantage Systems knowingly put millions of users at risk? I'm saying someone did, and I will not rest until I know who and why. What about Lucas Reed? Will he be returning to fix the system? The question hit her like a physical blow, because she didn't know. She had no idea if Lucas Reed would ever speak to her again, let alone help them. I hope so, she said honestly, but I wouldn't blame him if he never wanted to see this company again. We failed him. We betrayed his trust and his work, and now we're paying the price for that failure. She walked off stage before anyone could ask more questions. The fallout was immediate and more brutal than she'd anticipated. By noon, 3 board members had called for her immediate resignation. By 2 p.m., Gerald Hammond had issued his own statement denying any wrongdoing and suggesting that Scarlett was suffering from exhaustion and making reckless accusations without evidence. By 4 p.m., the company's stock had dropped 23%, wiping out billions in market value. By 6 p.m., her father's oldest friend, a man who'd known her since she was a child, had called to tell her she'd destroyed everything her father had built. Scarlett sat in her office, door locked, phone turned off, and stared at the Seattle skyline as the sun set. She'd probably just ended her career. She'd definitely made enemies who would spend years trying to destroy her. And for what? For a man who'd told her to leave him alone, for principles that didn't pay bills or save companies. But when she thought about Lucas Reed's tired eyes and his handmade porch swing and his daughter's pink bicycle with streamers, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. She opened her laptop and wrote a single email. To Shai, the email address Sarah had found buried in Lucas Reed's old HR file. From svale@vantagesystems.com. Subject: I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond, but I need to say it anyway. You were right. About everything. I found the emails you sent to Hammond. I found the warnings you tried to give. I found the documentation that was buried after you left. And this morning, I told the world about it. It probably won't change anything. The people responsible will likely never face real consequences. The board is calling for my resignation. The stock is cratering. And in a few days or weeks, I'll probably be gone too. But I wanted you to know that someone finally listened. You built something remarkable, something that millions of people depended on. And instead of being celebrated for it, you were erased. I can't undo that, but I can make sure people know the truth. If you ever change your mind about helping us, not for the company's sake, not for my sake, but for the sake of the people who need what you built, I'll be here. Either way, I'm sorry. Scarlett Vale. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, pulled out the bottle of scotch her father had kept there, probably for moments exactly like this, and poured herself 2 fingers in a coffee mug with the Vantage Systems logo on it. Her phone buzzed. Another threat from another anonymous number. She turned the phone face down and drank, watching the city lights flicker on one by one as darkness settled over Seattle. At 11:34 p.m., her computer pinged with a new email notification. She almost ignored it. Another reporter, another board member, another person demanding answers or explanations or her head on a platter, but something made her look. From anonymous.routing. .72849@protonmail.com to svale@vantagesystems.com. Subject: I'm sorry. No message, no explanation, just an attachment. A file labeled emergency_recovery_blueprint_v 3.pdf. Scarlett's hands trembled as she opened it. 47 pages. Dense technical specifications written with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Step-by-step protocols for not just restoring the system, but rebuilding it stronger. Every potential point of failure addressed, every vulnerability patched. Diagrams and flowcharts and code snippets that would mean nothing to her but everything to the engineers who needed them. It was flawless, professional, the work of someone who cared deeply about getting it right. At the bottom of the last page, 3 letters in small print, LRE. Scarlett read through it twice, her exhausted mind struggling to process what she was seeing. He hadn't signed his name, hadn't asked for credit or acknowledgement, Hadn't demanded apologies or compensation. He'd just saved them. Quietly. Anonymously. Without asking for anything in return. She forwarded the file to Marcus Wu and David Chen with a single line. Start implementing this immediately. I don't care if you have to work straight through the night. Make it happen. Then she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not because the crisis was over, it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Not because her job was secure, it definitely wasn't. Not because everything would magically work out, it probably wouldn't. But because somewhere in North Seattle, a man she'd never met before yesterday had chosen to do the right thing even though he had every reason not to. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was still hope for the rest of them too. By dawn, the recovery blueprint was working beyond anyone's expectations. Engineers moved through the protocols with increasing confidence, their exhaustion replaced by cautious optimism tempered with disbelief. Systems came back online one by one, each restoration faster and smoother than the last. Error rates dropped to near zero. Stability metrics climbed into ranges they hadn't seen in months. At 6:47 a.m., David Chen appeared in Scarlett's doorway. She'd fallen asleep at her desk somewhere around 3 in the morning, her head pillowed on her arms, the empty scotch mug still sitting beside her laptop. Scarlett? He shook her shoulder gently. Wake up. She jerked upright, disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Her neck screamed in protest from the awkward angle. What? What happened? We're at 98% functionality. Another hour and we'll be fully operational. David's face was a mixture of exhaustion and something close to awe. Whatever was in that blueprint, it's not just fixing the system, it's making it better, more efficient, more stable. Marcus says we're running at performance levels we've never achieved before. Scarlett blinked, trying to process through the fog of too little sleep and too much stress. The blueprint worked? Perfectly. Whoever wrote this is either a genius or has access to knowledge about our infrastructure that shouldn't exist anymore. David pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. Marcus wanted me to tell you something. He said the code in that blueprint contains optimizations that Reed never implemented when he worked here. Improvements he must have thought about after he left, which means he's been thinking about the system even after they fired him. Scarlett rubbed her eyes, feeling something twist in her chest. Even after everything they did to him, he still cared enough to make it better. Yeah. David was quiet for a moment. Any idea who actually sent it? The email was routed through about 15 different proxy servers, completely untraceable. Scarlett smiled despite everything. Of course it was. Lucas Reed wasn't going to make it easy. He'd saved them, but he'd done it on his own terms, anonymously, without giving anyone the chance to turn his help into leverage. There's something else, David said carefully, in the tone that meant she wasn't going to like what came next. Hammond resigned, about 20 minutes ago, effective immediately. Scarlett sat up straighter. What? One of the junior engineers, kid named Tommy Zhao, just started 6 months ago. He was going through some of the archived files looking for additional documentation. Found emails between Hammond and someone at Databridge Analytics. Turns out Hammond was planning to sell infrastructure access to third parties without board approval. Not just selling data, selling actual access to our systems. Backdoors, essentially. The implications hit Scarlett like cold water. That's not just unethical. That's potentially criminal. Yeah, and Reed must have found out. There's an email thread from 7 months ago where Reed is asking Hammond pointed questions about unauthorized API access requests and unusual query patterns from external sources. Hammond kept deflecting, but Reed wouldn't let it go. So Hammond fired him to shut him up. Looks that way. Tommy sent everything to the board at 5 this morning. By 5:30, Hammond had submitted his resignation letter. By 6, his office was cleared out and his security access was revoked. David leaned back in his chair. The board's calling an emergency meeting for 9 a.m. They want to discuss next steps. Let them discuss. Scarlett stood, her joints protesting. She felt like she'd aged 10 years in the past 48 hours. I have somewhere to be. David's eyebrows rose. You're going back to Reed's house. I need to thank him. Scarlett, you just blew up your own company on live television. The board wants your head. The stock is in freefall. Maybe I should what? Hide? Play politics? Pretend I didn't just expose massive corruption because it's bad for optics? She grabbed her coat, the same one she'd worn yesterday, still slightly damp from the rain. Reed saved us, not for money, not for recognition, but because people needed help. The least I can do is look him in the eye and say thank you. And if he slams the door in your face again, then at least I tried. The drive to North Seattle felt different in the early morning light. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming. Traffic was light at this hour, mostly early shift workers and delivery trucks. Scarlett drove with her windows down, letting the cold air keep her alert despite the exhaustion dragging at her bones. She thought about what she'd say, practiced different approaches in her mind. Thank you seemed inadequate. I'm sorry felt hollow after everything that had happened. You were right, didn't even begin to cover it. By the time she reached the pale blue bungalow, the sun was fully up, painting the wet streets in shades of gold and amber. The neighborhood looked peaceful. A man walked his dog past her car. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower started up despite the early hour. Scarlett parked at the curb and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she saw movement on the porch. Lucas Reed sat on the handmade swing, a mug of something steaming in his hands, staring at nothing in particular. He wore the same jeans as yesterday, but a different t-shirt. This one, plain gray, no cartoon robots. His hair was wet, like he'd just showered. He looked tired, but calmer than he had when she'd shown up unannounced the day before. He saw her car, saw her sitting in it. And for a long moment, they just looked at each other across the distance of lawn and sidewalk and everything that had happened. Then he raised his mug slightly. Not quite a wave, not quite an invitation, but not a dismissal either. Scarlett got out of the car and walked to the porch. You sent it, she said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. Lucas took a sip from his mug. Coffee, from the smell. Don't know what you're talking about. The recovery blueprint. 47 pages of detailed specifications that saved our entire infrastructure. Sounds useful. It was brilliant. Still don't know what you're talking about. But there was the ghost of something in his expression. Not quite a smile. Maybe the memory of one. Scarlett climbed the porch steps and leaned against the railing. Up close, she could see that Lucas looked as tired as she felt. The kind of tired that came from too many sleepless nights and too much emotional weight. I saw the press conference, he said after a moment. This morning, couldn't sleep, turned on the news, and there you were, blowing up your own company, admitting fault, promising consequences. He looked at her. That took guts. Or stupidity. Maybe both. Probably both. Your board's going to crucify you for it. Already started. Scarlett pulled out her phone and showed him the headlines that had been piling up since dawn. 3 resignation demands, stock down 23%, legal threats from shareholders. My father's best friend called me a disgrace to his memory. Lucas studied the headlines, his expression unreadable. So why did you do it? Because you were right. And because someone needed to prove that not everyone in that company is corrupt. One person telling the truth doesn't fix a broken system. No, but it's a start. She put her phone away. Hammond resigned this morning. One of our junior engineers found evidence that he was selling access to our infrastructure, back doors to third parties. Exactly what you were warning him about. Something shifted in Lucas's face. Not satisfaction exactly. More like vindication mixed with sadness. Let me guess. He'll get a severance package worth millions and retire quietly while the company claims it was a difference in strategic vision. Actually, the board is considering criminal charges. Turns out selling unauthorized access to government and healthcare data is extremely illegal. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, processing. The blueprint you sent, it wasn't just a fix. It was an improvement. My engineers say the system is running better than it ever has. Maybe your engineers just aren't very good at their jobs. Or maybe you're better at this than you want to admit. Lucas set his mug down on the porch railing. Why are you here, Miss Vale? Scarlett? And I'm here to say thank you. You didn't have to help us. After everything that happened, you had every right to let us fail. But you didn't. You put the needs of 4 million strangers ahead of your own very justified anger. That means something. It means I'm a sucker who can't let people suffer because of someone else's mistakes. He looked at her. Don't make me regret it. I won't. You can't promise that. No, Scarlett admitted, but I can promise to try. The front door opened and a small girl appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She was 7, maybe 8, with dark hair that stuck up in wild angles and her father's serious eyes. She wore pajamas covered in stars and moons, one sock on, one sock missing. Daddy? Her voice was small, uncertain. Who's that? Lucas's entire demeanor changed instantly. The guardedness fell away, replaced by something gentler. Just someone from work, sweetheart. Go brush your teeth. I'll make breakfast in a minute. Okay? Emma, it had to be Emma, looked at Scarlett with open curiosity. Are you the lady from the news? The one who said Daddy was right? Scarlett felt her throat tighten. Yeah, that's me. That's... Emma considered this. Good. He's always right, even when I don't want him to be. Then she disappeared back inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Lucas stood, picking up his mug. I need to get her ready for school. Of course. Scarlett turned to go, then stopped. One more thing. If you ever change your mind about coming back, not as an employee but as a consultant, with complete autonomy and fair compensation, the offer stands. No pressure. No strings. Just, if you want it, it's there. Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Why does this matter so much to you? Because for the first time since I became CEO, I met someone who actually gives a damn about doing the right thing instead of protecting their position. And that's exactly the kind of person I need if I'm going to fix what's broken. You might not be CEO much longer. Then I'll need good people even more. She smiled. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. She walked back to her car, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way. Just before she opened the car door, his voice carried across the lawn. Scarlett, she turned. The system needs maintenance every 6 weeks. There's a schedule in the blueprint. Don't skip it. We won't. I mean it. Miss 1 cycle and you'll start seeing cascade failures again. Miss 2 and you're back where you started. I'll personally oversee it. He nodded once, then went inside. Scarlett drove back to the office feeling lighter than she had in days. The board meeting at 9 a.m. was exactly as brutal as she'd expected. 10 executives in a room that smelled like expensive cologne and simmering resentment. Richard Thornton, the CFO, led the charge. Your stunt yesterday cost this company $4 billion in market value, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. $4 billion. Gone. Because you decided to air our dirty laundry on national television. I told the truth, Scarlett said calmly. She'd prepared for this. Had known it was coming. Hammond was selling unauthorized access to our infrastructure. That's not dirty laundry. That's a crime. A crime you had no proof of when you made your little speech. I had evidence of buried documentation and a pattern of corruption. The proof of Hammond's dealings came later, but it confirmed what I already knew, that someone in leadership was more interested in profit than protecting our users. Your job isn't to be a crusader, another board member, Patricia Wells, said sharply. Your job is to protect shareholder value, to maintain stability, to lead with discretion. My job, Scarlett said, meeting her gaze, is to run a company that deserves to exist, and a company that silences whistleblowers and sells access to sensitive data doesn't deserve to exist. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying, the careful veneer of corporate professionalism cracking to reveal the raw power struggle underneath. Enough! The voice came from the end of the table. Margaret Chen, the oldest board member and one of the original investors. She was 78, sharp as a knife, and hadn't spoken until now. The room fell silent. Scarlett made mistakes, Margaret said. She acted rashly. She damaged our stock value and our reputation, but she also exposed a VP who was actively selling our infrastructure to the highest bidder. A VP who could have landed this entire company in federal prison if his activities had continued. She looked around the table. So before we crucify her for her methods, perhaps we should acknowledge that her instincts were correct. Her instincts don't pay our bills, Thornton shot back. No, but Lucas Reed's blueprint does. We're at full operational capacity for the first time in 8 months. Our performance metrics are the best they've been in the company's history, and our users are coming back. Margaret pulled up a tablet, displaying real-time analytics. Customer retention is up. Cancellations are down. Why? Because for once we told them the truth instead of feeding them corporate nonsense. She set the tablet down and looked at Scarlett. You have 3 months. Fix the leadership team. Rebuild trust with our users. Stabilize the stock. If you can do that, you keep your job. If you can't, we'll find someone who can. It wasn't exactly a vote of confidence, but it wasn't a firing either. 3 months, Scarlett said. I'll make it work. See that you do. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some avoiding her eyes, others shooting her looks that ranged from grudging respect to outright hostility. Scarlett stayed in her chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Margaret paused at the door. Your father would have handled this differently. I know. He would have protected Hammond, buried the evidence, kept everything quiet, and dealt with it internally. The older woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. He was very good at that, very good at maintaining the appearance of perfection while hiding the rot underneath. Scarlett looked up, startled. You knew? Of course I knew. I've been on this board for 30 years. You don't last that long without learning to read between the lines. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Your father built something impressive, but he built it on compromises that eventually would have destroyed it. You're trying to build something different, something honest. It's harder, messier, but maybe it's what this company needs. She left before Scarlett could respond. The next 2 weeks were a blur of 18-hour days and constant firefighting. Scarlett restructured the entire executive team, firing 3 VPs who'd been complicit in Hammond's schemes and promoting from within wherever possible. She instituted new transparency protocols, requiring regular public reports on data security and user privacy. She personally oversaw the implementation of Lucas Reed's maintenance schedule, sitting in on engineering meetings and learning enough technical vocabulary to ask intelligent questions. The stock stabilized, then slowly began to climb. User trust, according to surveys, was cautiously returning. The press, which had initially crucified her, started running think pieces about radical transparency and tech leadership. But every night she went home to an empty apartment and wondered if she was actually fixing anything or just rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks and 3 days after the press conference, her assistant buzzed her office. There's someone here to see you, Jennifer said. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Who is it? A pause. Lucas Reed. Scarlett's heart jumped. Send him in. A moment later, Lucas walked into her office, looking around with the wary expression of someone entering enemy territory. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt that looked new, like he'd bought it specifically for this meeting. His hands were in his pockets. Nice view, he said, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Thanks. Can I get you coffee? Water? I'm fine. He turned to face her. I've been following the news, the restructuring, the transparency initiatives, the maintenance compliance. We're sticking to your schedule every 6 weeks, exactly as specified. I noticed. I also noticed you're down 3 VPs and your director of engineering just quit. Marcus Wu. Yeah, his wife got a job offer in Boston. He didn't want to do long distance. Scarlett leaned against her desk. Why are you here, Lucas? He pulled a folder from inside his jacket and set it on her desk. I've been thinking about your offer, the consultant position. And? I have conditions. I'm listening. Lucas opened the folder, revealing several typed pages. First, I work remotely. I don't come into this office unless absolutely necessary. I have a daughter who needs me home at predictable hours. That's non-negotiable. Done. Second, I report directly to you. No intermediaries, no VPs trying to override my technical decisions. If you disagree with something, we discuss it, but you don't bring in some other expert to second-guess me. Agreed. Third, my recommendations on user privacy and data security are binding. You can override me if you want, but if you do, I walk and I make it very public why I'm walking. Scarlett considered. That was a big ask, essentially giving him veto power over major business decisions. But then again, his judgment had been right about everything so far. Okay, but with one caveat. You have to explain your reasoning. If I'm going to back your decisions to the board, I need to understand them well enough to defend them. Lucas nodded slowly. Fair. Anything else? Yeah, one more thing. He pulled out another document. I want you to establish a whistleblower protection program, independent oversight, anonymous reporting, real consequences for retaliation. If someone sees something wrong, they should be able to report it without fear of ending up like I did. Scarlett took the document and read through it. It was detailed, specific, and would fundamentally change how the company handled internal complaints. This will cost money, and it'll make some people very uncomfortable. That's the point. Comfortable people don't change, and this company needs to change. She looked at him, really looked at him, standing in her office in his new shirt, demanding systematic reform as a condition of employment. This wasn't someone looking for a paycheck. This was someone who'd been broken by a corrupt system and was determined to make sure it didn't break anyone else. I'll take it to the board tomorrow. I can't promise they'll approve everything, but I'll fight for it. That's all I'm asking. Lucas picked up his folder. There's one more thing, not a condition, just something you should know. What's that? Emma asked me why I stopped working on something I cared about just because some people were mean to me. He smiled slightly. 7-year-olds have a way of cutting through nonsense. So I thought about it. And she was right. I let Hammond take something I built and turn it into ammunition against me. I let his corruption make me walk away from work that mattered. You were protecting yourself. That's not weakness. No. But it's not enough either. Lucas moved toward the door, then paused. Your father built this company on compromises and closed doors. You're trying to build it on transparency and accountability. That's going to be hard. People are going to fight you. Some of them will win. But at least you're trying to build something worth protecting. He left before she could respond. Scarlett sat down at her desk and read through his whistleblower protection proposal 3 times. It was ambitious, probably expensive, definitely going to upset board members who preferred the old way of handling problems. She scheduled an emergency board meeting for the next morning. Margaret Chen was the first to arrive, carrying her usual tea and tablet. She read through Lucas's proposal in silence while other board members filtered in, complaining about the early hour and demanding to know why this couldn't wait. When everyone was seated, Scarlett distributed copies of the proposal. Lucas Reed has agreed to return as a senior consultant. These are his conditions. Thornton didn't even finish reading before objecting. A whistleblower program. Independent oversight? This is insane. We already have HR protocols for complaints. Those protocols failed, Scarlett said flatly. Lucas Reed tried to report corruption through proper channels. He was fired for it. If we'd had a real protection program, Hammond's activities would have been stopped years ago. Or we would have been buried in frivolous complaints from disgruntled employees, Patricia Wells argued. You're opening us up to abuse. We're opening ourselves up to accountability. Scarlett kept her voice level. Which is what we should have been doing all along. The debate went on for 90 minutes. Voices were raised. Threats were made. At one point, Thornton suggested they just hire a different consultant and forget about Reed's conditions. Fine, Scarlett said. Name someone with Reed's expertise who's willing to work with us after we publicly destroyed him. Silence. Finally, Margaret spoke. I move to approve Reed's conditions as written, with one modification. The whistleblower program will have a 6-month trial period. If it's being abused, we revisit. I second, another board member said quietly. Thomas Wu, who'd been silent until now. The vote was 5-4 in favor. Scarlett called Lucas that afternoon. It's approved, all of it. 6-month trial on the whistleblower program, but after that it's permanent if it's working. When do I start? Whenever you want. Monday. I need to arrange childcare for Emma first. About that. Scarlett had been thinking about this since their meeting. Does Emma like science, robots, building things? She's 7. She likes everything that involves taking things apart and not putting them back together. Why? Because we have a really good daycare program here, on site. It's mostly for younger kids, but they also run an after-school program for elementary age. Homework help, STEM activities, art projects. If you wanted to work from the office occasionally, not every day, but sometimes, she could be here with you. Lucas was quiet for so long that Scarlett thought the call had dropped. You're offering my daughter daycare. I'm offering flexibility. You want to work from home most days? Great. But if you need to be here for meetings or hands-on system work, you shouldn't have to scramble for childcare. Bring her. Let her see what you do. Let her know that work doesn't have to mean abandoning the people you love. More silence. Lucas? Yeah. I'm here. His voice sounded rough. That's Thank you. I'll think about it. Take your time. She hung up and stared at her computer screen, at the endless emails waiting for attention, at the crisis management that never seemed to end. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was building something that could last. Lucas showed up Monday morning at 8 a.m. with Emma in tow. The 7-year-old was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt that said Future Engineer and carried a backpack shaped like a robot. She looked around the lobby with wide eyes, taking in the glass and steel and general atmosphere of corporate efficiency. "It's really tall," she said to her father. 42 floors. That's a lot of stairs. Good thing we have elevators. Scarlett met them in the lobby, having made sure she was there personally rather than sending an assistant. First impressions mattered, especially with kids. "You must be Emma," she said, crouching down to eye level. "I'm Scarlett." Emma studied her seriously. "You're the one who said my dad was smart." "Your dad is very smart. The smartest person I know, actually. I know. He helps me with my math homework, and he never has to look at the answer key." Emma's expression turned suspicious. "Are you going to be mean to him like the last people?" "Emma," Lucas said quietly, "that's not—" "No," Scarlett interrupted, looking Emma in the eye. "I'm not going to be mean to him. And if anyone here is, you tell me immediately and I'll fix it. Deal?" Emma considered this. "Deal. Can I see the robots?" "The what?" "The robots. Dad says there are robots here that move stuff around." Lucas smiled slightly. "The automated delivery system in the server rooms. I might have oversold how cool they are." "Or," Scarlett said, standing up, "we could go see them and let Emma decide for herself. I've got 20 minutes before my first meeting." They spent 15 minutes in the server rooms, watching the automated systems move equipment and supplies through carefully designed corridors. Emma was entranced, asking questions faster than Lucas could answer them. Why do they move like that? How do they know where to go? Can I build one? When Scarlett finally had to leave for her meeting, Emma hugged her father and went with one of the after-school program coordinators without complaint. Lucas watched her go with the expression of a parent who just accomplished something impossible. "She usually hates new places," he said quietly. "Takes her hours to warm up. She's your daughter. Smart enough to know when she's somewhere safe." Scarlett led him toward the elevators. "Your office is on 23 near the engineering team. I had IT set up your access and credentials. Whatever you need, just ask." "What's the current crisis? Where do I start?" She pulled out her phone and showed him the morning's incident report. "Payment processing is having intermittent issues. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to worry me. Customer service is getting complaints about slow data retrieval, and we've got a security audit starting next week that I'm not confident will pass." Lucas scanned the report, his expression shifting into what she was starting to recognize as his work mode: focused, analytical, slightly removed. "The payment issues are probably related to the database optimization I flagged in the blueprint. It's on the maintenance schedule for next week, but we can move it up if needed. The slow retrieval is a caching problem, easy fix, and the security audit," he looked up. "How bad is it really? On a scale of 1 to 10? "About a 7. Hammond's back doors are closed, but there's legacy code everywhere that makes me nervous. I'll need access to the full code base, and I want to bring in someone I trust to do a proper security review. Former colleague of mine. Works independent now. She's expensive, but worth it." "Do it, whatever you need." They rode the elevator in silence for a moment. Then Lucas said, "You're different than I expected." "Different how?" "Most CEOs I've dealt with are either incompetent or ruthless. You're neither." "I'm learning to be ruthless when it matters." "The incompetent part is still up for debate." "You're doing better than you think." The compliment caught her off guard. "Thanks." "Don't let it go to your head. You've still got a lot to prove." She smiled. Noted. Over the next month, Scarlett watched Lucas transform the engineering department, not through authority or mandates, but through quiet competence and the kind of respect that had to be earned. He'd show up around 9, work until 3, then leave to pick up Emma from the after-school program. But in those 6 hours, he accomplished more than most people did in 12. He rewrote critical sections of code. He identified vulnerabilities no one else had noticed. He taught junior engineers not just what to do, but why it mattered. And slowly, the culture began to shift. People started asking questions instead of assuming. They documented their work. They thought about long-term consequences instead of short-term fixes. The whistleblower program went live in week 2. The first report came in within 48 hours. A mid-level manager in sales who'd been falsifying performance metrics to hit bonus targets. The investigation was swift, fair, and resulted in termination and restitution. The message was clear. The old ways were over. By week 4, Scarlett had received 17 whistleblower reports. Most were minor. A few were serious. All were handled with the same transparency and accountability that Lucas had demanded. The board's 6-month trial period started looking like a formality. One evening, around 6 p.m., Scarlett was working late when she heard laughter from down the hall. Curious, she followed the sound to one of the smaller conference rooms. Through the glass wall, she could see Lucas and Emma sitting at the table, surrounded by what appeared to be a disassembled tablet and various tools. Emma was concentrating intensely on something involving a screwdriver. Lucas was guiding her hands, showing her how to remove a component without damaging it. "But why does it need this part?" Emma asked. "Because the screen needs to know what you're touching. This part translates your finger into electrical signals the computer can understand." "That's so cool. Can I keep it?" "If we can't get the tablet back together, your dad's going to have to buy the company a new one. So maybe we should finish the repair first." Emma giggled. "You're worried." "Little bit, yeah." Scarlett watched them for a moment longer, then quietly walked away. She didn't want to interrupt whatever this was. A father teaching his daughter, yes, but also someone rebuilding trust in a place that had broken him. 2 months into Lucas's consultancy, the company's stock had recovered to pre-crisis levels. Customer satisfaction ratings were at an all-time high, and Scarlett had successfully fought off 3 more attempts by various board members to return to traditional management practices. She was in her office reviewing quarterly projections when Lucas appeared in her doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Got a minute?" he asked. "For coffee?" "Always." He came in and set 1 cup on her desk, then settled into the chair across from her. They'd developed an easy routine over the past weeks. Morning check-ins, afternoon problem-solving sessions, occasional late-night crisis management when something broke. It felt natural in a way most of her professional relationships didn't. "I've been thinking about something," Lucas said. "Your 3-month deadline from the board is coming up, 2 weeks from now." "I know, trying not to panic about it." "You're going to pass. The metrics are good. The board knows it. Even Thornton has stopped actively trying to get you fired. He's moved on to passive-aggressive emails instead. I consider it progress." Lucas smiled. "My point is, you've stabilized the company, fixed the immediate problems, but you're still playing defense, reacting to crises instead of building something new." Scarlett leaned back in her chair. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to stop fixing your father's company and start building your own." He pulled out his tablet and showed her a series of documents. "I've been working on something. A proposal for a complete infrastructure overhaul. Not just maintaining what exists, but rebuilding from the ground up with modern architecture, better security, genuine privacy protections built into the foundation." She scanned through the documents, her eyes widening as she understood the scope. "This is massive. It would take years. 3 years, probably. Maybe 4. But at the end, you'd have something truly innovative, something that actually deserves the trust people place in it. It would also cost a fortune. The board would never approve this kind of long-term investment. Then don't ask them. Not yet." Lucas leaned forward. "Build a prototype. Something small enough to fly under the radar, but significant enough to prove the concept. Show them what's possible. Then make them choose between staying mediocre or becoming extraordinary." Scarlett looked at him, seeing not just the consultant she'd hired, but someone who'd started to believe again. In the work. In the possibility of building something that mattered. "You'd need full-time commitment for something like this," she said. "Not 6 hours a day." "I know." "And you'd need a team, resources, lab space, probably a bigger budget than I can justify without board approval." "I know that too." "So why are you proposing it?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Because Emma asked me last night if I liked my job. And I realized it was the first time in years I could honestly say yes. Because I'm working with someone who actually cares about doing things right instead of just doing things profitably. And because I'm tired of fixing other people's mistakes. I want to build something new, something that can't be corrupted or compromised or buried when it becomes inconvenient." He met her eyes. "I'm asking if you want to build it with me." Scarlett felt something shift in her chest. This was bigger than a consultancy, bigger than crisis management. This was a genuine partnership, a shared vision. It was also risky as hell. If we do this, she said slowly, and it fails, we both go down. The board will use it as proof that I'm reckless. Your reputation will take another hit. We could lose everything. Yeah, and if we succeed, we'll have built something actually worth protecting. That's the idea. She looked at the documents again, seeing past the technical specifications to what they really represented. A chance to build something honest, something that didn't require compromises or closed doors. Okay, she said, let's do it. Lucas smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. They shook hands across her desk, sealing an agreement that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could predict. Outside, Seattle continued its evening routine, oblivious to the quiet revolution being planned on the 42nd floor. But somewhere in the building, the seeds of something new had just been planted, and this time, they were going to let it grow. The prototype lab was supposed to be secret, but by the end of the first week, half the engineering department knew something was happening in the sealed-off section of the 23rd floor. Scarlett had requisitioned the space under the guise of infrastructure research, which was technically true but deliberately vague. Lucas had handpicked a team of 5 engineers, people he trusted, people who'd proven they cared more about the work than the politics. They called themselves Project Cornerstone, though Lucas hated the name. It sounds like a construction company, he'd said when Sarah Park suggested it. That's the point, Sarah had countered. We're building a foundation, from the ground up. The name stuck. Scarlett found herself spending more time on the 23rd floor than in her own office. The board meetings and investor calls still demanded her attention, but her mind was always partially elsewhere, thinking about architecture diagrams and security protocols and the ambitious timeline Lucas had laid out on the whiteboard. 3 weeks into the project, they hit their first major obstacle. It's not going to work. Marcus Wu, who'd delayed his move to Boston by 2 months specifically to work on Cornerstone, stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, looking frustrated. The encryption layer we're proposing requires processing power that doesn't exist yet. Not commercially, anyway. We'd have to custom build processors, which would cost millions and take years. Lucas leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Then we don't use traditional encryption. What are you suggesting? Quantum? Because that's even more expensive and less reliable. I'm suggesting we think laterally. The problem isn't encryption, it's centralization. We're trying to protect data in one place. What if we don't keep it in one place? Sarah looked up from her laptop. Distributed storage? That's not exactly revolutionary. Not just distributed, fragmented. Each piece of data split across multiple nodes, encrypted separately with the assembly key generated locally on the user's device. Even if someone compromises our servers, all they get are useless fragments. The room went quiet as people processed the implications. That's insane, Marcus said slowly. The computational overhead alone would be handled client-side. We're not processing it. The user's device is. What about users with older devices? Limited processing power. Progressive enhancement. High-end devices get maximum security. Older devices get standard encryption. But everyone gets better protection than they have now. Scarlett watched the debate unfold, feeling out of her depth technically, but understanding the core principle. Instead of building a fortress, they were building a system where there was nothing worth stealing. It was elegant in its simplicity, terrifying in its ambition. How long would it take to build a working prototype, she asked. Lucas and Marcus exchanged glances. 6 weeks, Marcus said. Maybe 8. You have 4. That's not enough time. I know, but that's all I can give you before the board starts asking questions about what I'm spending research budget on. 4 weeks to prove the concept. Then we can request proper funding. The team grumbled but accepted it. Scarlett had learned that engineers responded better to impossible deadlines than comfortable ones. Something about the challenge brought out their creativity. She left them arguing about implementation details and returned to her office, where a stack of contracts waited for her signature and her assistant had left 3 increasingly urgent notes about a conference call with investors. The next month was a blur of double lives. During the day, Scarlett played the role of CEO, reassuring investors, managing board expectations, handling the endless stream of decisions that running a billion-dollar company required. But her real focus was always on the 23rd floor, where Lucas and his team were building something that could change everything. She started staying late long after most employees had gone home. The executive floor would empty out around 7, leaving just her and the cleaning crew. Around 8, she'd take the elevator down to 23 and find Lucas still working, Emma usually asleep on the couch in his office, wrapped in a blanket Lucas kept there for exactly this purpose. "You should take her home," Scarlett said one night, finding him reviewing code at 9:30 with his daughter curled up nearby. "I will. Soon. Just want to finish this section." "That's what you said an hour ago." Lucas looked up, surprised. "You've been here an hour?" "In the lab, yeah. You were too focused to notice." She pulled up a chair and sat down. The office was small, cluttered with technical manuals and Emma's drawings taped to the walls. It felt more real than her pristine corner office with its designer furniture and carefully curated art. "We're close," Lucas said, gesturing at his screen. "Really close. The fragmentation algorithm is working better than expected. We're seeing 98% efficiency with 0 data loss." "In English?" "It works. Not perfectly, but well enough to prove we're not crazy." Scarlett felt something loosen in her chest. "Show me." He pulled up a demonstration, walking her through how the system would work from a user's perspective. Upload a file, watch it disappear into fragments, retrieve it instantly when needed. Simple on the surface, revolutionary underneath. "This could actually work," she said quietly. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised you can build it. I'm surprised the board might actually approve it." Lucas saved his work and closed his laptop. "You're worried about the presentation. I'm worried about a lot of things. The presentation is just the most immediate." She rubbed her eyes, feeling the weight of sleepless nights catching up with her. "Thornton's already skeptical. Patricia thinks we should be focused on quarterly earnings instead of long-term innovation. And Margaret, who's been my only real ally, is starting to question whether I'm spending too much time on pet projects." "This isn't a pet project." "I know that. You know that. But to them, it looks like the CEO playing scientist instead of leading." "Then show them why it matters." Lucas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline lit up against the night. "You're trying to build something that actually deserves people's trust. That's not a pet project. That's the only thing worth doing." Emma stirred on the couch, mumbling something in her sleep. Lucas went to her automatically, adjusting her blanket and smoothing her hair. The gesture was so natural, so unconsciously tender, that Scarlett felt something catch in her throat. "You're a good father," she said quietly. "I'm a tired father who keeps his kid out too late because he can't stop working." But he said it with affection, not guilt. She knows you're building something important. That matters to kids, knowing their parents care about something bigger than just paying bills. "Is that what your father taught you?" The question caught her off guard. She thought about her father, brilliant, driven, ruthless when he needed to be. Had he taught her that work mattered? Or had he taught her that work was all that mattered? "My father taught me how to run a company," she said carefully. "But he didn't teach me how to build something worth running. I'm learning that from you." Lucas looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "We're learning it together." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Emma shifted again, and Lucas bent to pick her up. "I should get her home." "Yeah, I should get some sleep too." Scarlett stood, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the small office. "See you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow. And Scarlett?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For trusting me with this, for giving me a chance to build something that matters." "Thank you for taking the chance." She left before the moment could become more complicated, taking the elevator up to her office to grab her things. But as she drove home through empty streets, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Lucas had looked at her, like she was someone worth believing in. It was dangerous, that feeling. Professional boundaries existed for good reasons, but she couldn't quite bring herself to regret crossing them. The 4-week deadline arrived with the kind of pressure that made everyone slightly frantic. The team had been working 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and takeout, and the desperate energy of people who knew they were building something extraordinary. The prototype was functional, but rough around the edges, held together with workarounds and optimistic assumptions about how forgiving the demonstration would be. "We need another week," Marcus said the night before the board presentation. They were in the lab at 11 p.m., running final tests. "Just one more week to smooth out the edge cases." "We don't have a week." Scarlett was reviewing the presentation slides for the 10th time, trying to find the narrative thread that would make board members understand why this mattered. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'm either showing them something that works or admitting I wasted a month of research budget on vapor. It works, Lucas said firmly. He was at his workstation, eyes locked on streams of data flowing across multiple monitors. It's not perfect, but it works. We can demonstrate core functionality. That's enough. Enough to get approval for full funding? Enough to show them we're not insane. Sarah laughed, slightly hysterical. The bar for success just keeps getting lower. Welcome to startup culture, Marcus muttered. We're not a startup, Scarlett reminded them. We're a billion-dollar company that's supposed to be stable and predictable and absolutely not gambling on experimental technology. Then why are we doing this? Sarah asked. The question hung in the air. Why were they doing this? Why was Scarlett risking her already precarious position as CEO? Why was Lucas investing his reputation in something that could easily fail? Why were 5 engineers sacrificing sleep and sanity for a prototype that might get shut down in a single meeting? Because it's the right thing to do, Lucas said quietly, not looking away from his monitors. Because people deserve infrastructure they can actually trust. Because building something good is worth the risk of failing. He looked at Scarlett then, and she saw her own doubts and determination reflected back at her. That's not going to convince the board, Scarlett said. Then convince them with numbers. Show them the market opportunity, the competitive advantage, the fact that every other tech company is scrambling to rebuild trust after years of data breaches and privacy violations. We're not just building better technology, we're building the future of how people interact with their own information. Scarlett looked at her team, exhausted, anxious, brilliant people who'd believed in this vision enough to bet their careers on it. She thought about her father, who'd built an empire on compromise and control, and she thought about what she wanted her own legacy to be. Okay, she said. Let's show them the future. The board meeting started badly and got worse. Thornton was openly hostile from the moment Scarlett revealed what Project Cornerstone actually was. You've spent a month and $3 million on experimental technology without board approval? I spent discretionary research budget on a prototype that could revolutionize our entire infrastructure. You spent money we don't have on a gamble we didn't authorize. The research budget is mine to allocate, for incremental improvements, not complete system overhauls. Patricia Wells cut in before Scarlett could respond. Let's see the demonstration. Then we can decide if it was worth the investment. Lucas set up the presentation while Scarlett pulled up the slides she'd been refining for days. Emma was in the after-school program, probably building something out of recycled electronics and duct tape. Scarlett had promised her they'd get ice cream later, regardless of how the meeting went. That promise felt increasingly optimistic. What you're looking at, Lucas began, his voice calm despite the tension in the room, is a fundamental rethinking of how we handle user data. Current systems centralize information, making them attractive targets for attacks. Our approach fragments data across distributed nodes with client-side assembly. Think of it as the difference between keeping all your money in one bank vault versus keeping pieces of each bill in different locations that only you can reassemble. He walked them through the technical specifications, translating complex concepts into language board members could understand. Scarlett watched their faces, trying to gauge reactions. Margaret looked intrigued. Thomas Wu was taking notes. Thornton's expression suggested he was calculating how to use this against her. The demonstration itself went flawlessly. Lucas uploaded a sensitive document, showed how it fragmented and distributed across their test network, then retrieved it instantly on a separate device. No lag, no data loss, just seamless protection that happened invisibly to the user. How much would it cost to implement this company-wide? Margaret asked. Full implementation would run about $80 million over 3 years, Scarlett said, expecting the reaction she got. Sharp intakes of breath, exchanged glances, Thornton's derisive snort. $80 million for technology that doesn't have a proven track record, Thornton said. That's insane. It's an investment in the only thing that actually matters, user trust. Scarlett kept her voice level. Every competitor we have is dealing with data breaches and privacy scandals. We have the opportunity to build something genuinely secure, to be the company people trust with their most sensitive information. Or we could improve our existing systems for a fraction of the cost, Patricia countered. Incremental enhancement instead of revolutionary gambling. Incremental enhancement is how we ended up with the infrastructure that collapsed 2 months ago, Lucas said quietly. You can patch a broken foundation forever, but eventually you need to rebuild. Thornton turned on him. With all due respect, Mr. Reed, your last foundation failed spectacularly. My last foundation, Lucas said, his voice hardening, was deliberately sabotaged by someone in this room's predecessor. It failed because people like Hammond prioritized profit over integrity. We're proposing the opposite approach. We're proposing spending $80 million on hope, Thornton shot back. We're proposing spending $80 million on the future, Scarlett stood, commanding attention. Every metric we have shows that users are demanding better privacy protection. Governments are passing stricter regulations. Our competitors are scrambling to respond. We have the technology, the expertise, and the opportunity to lead instead of follow. The question isn't whether we can afford to do this, it's whether we can afford not to. The room fell silent. Margaret was the first to speak. I move that we approve a pilot program, $20 million for the first year. If it meets predetermined success metrics, we continue funding. If it doesn't, we shut it down and write it off as research and development. I second, Thomas said. This is reckless, Thornton protested. We're rewarding Scarlett for going behind our backs. We're investing in innovation, Margaret interrupted, which is what this company should have been doing all along instead of resting on outdated infrastructure. All in favor? The vote was 6-3 in favor. Scarlett felt her knees go weak with relief. 20 million wasn't 80, but it was enough. Enough to prove the concept, enough to build something real. Thank you, she said to the board. You won't regret this. We'd better not, Thornton muttered. After the meeting, Lucas found Scarlett in her office, staring out at the Seattle skyline with an expression somewhere between triumph and exhaustion. We did it, he said. You did it. That demonstration was flawless. We did it together. He moved to stand beside her at the window. 20 million is a good start. It's enough to scare me. What if we're wrong? What if the technology doesn't scale? What if then we'll fail spectacularly and become a cautionary tale about hubris in tech leadership? Lucas smiled slightly. But we'll fail trying to do something worth doing. That counts for something. Does it? Ask me in a year, Scarlett laughed, feeling some of the tension drain away. I promised Emma ice cream. Want to come? We should celebrate. Something flickered across Lucas's face. That sounds good. They picked up Emma from the after-school program and drove to a place near Lucas's house that apparently had the best mint chocolate chip in Seattle. Emma talked non-stop about the robot she was building, how it was going to have 6 legs and be able to climb stairs, and how her dad was going to help her program it to follow voice commands. That's ambitious, Scarlett said, watching Emma attack her ice cream with single-minded determination. She doesn't know what's impossible yet, Lucas said. I'm not going to be the one to tell her. My dad told me I couldn't run the company when I was younger, said I didn't have the temperament for it. What changed? He died, and I didn't have a choice. She took a bite of her ice cream, vanilla, simple, safe. Sometimes I wonder if he was right. If I'm just fumbling through this because I have to, not because I'm actually good at it. You're good at it, Lucas said firmly. You're building something worth protecting. Your father built something that required constant compromise and ethical shortcuts. There's a difference. Emma looked up from her ice cream, her face serious. Is your dad dead too? Emma, Lucas started, but Scarlett shook her head. It's okay. Yeah, he died a few months ago. Do you miss him? The question was so direct, so childishly honest, that Scarlett didn't know how to answer. Did she miss him? She missed the idea of him, the security of having someone else making the hard decisions, but the reality of who he'd been, the compromises he'd made, the people he'd hurt, she didn't miss that. Sometimes, she said carefully, but mostly I'm trying to build something better than what he left behind. Emma nodded like this made perfect sense. My mom died when I was 4. I don't remember her much, but Dad says she would have wanted me to build cool things. So I do. That sounds like good advice. She was smart, Lucas said quietly, looking at his daughter with an expression that made Scarlett's chest ache. Would have loved Cornerstone. She always said the best technology was the kind people didn't have to think about. They finished their ice cream and drove back through the city as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her head tilted at an angle that would definitely give her a sore neck later. When they reached Lucas's house, he carefully extracted Emma from her seatbelt and carried her inside. Scarlett waited in the car, engine running, telling herself she should leave. But when Lucas came back out and leaned against her car door, she rolled down the window. "Thank you," he said, "for the ice cream, for the project approval, for all of it. Thank you for believing this could work when I wasn't sure." "I wasn't sure either. I just didn't want to admit it." They smiled at each other, and Scarlett felt that dangerous feeling again, the sense that they were building something bigger than just a company project, something that involved late nights and shared victories, and the way Lucas looked at her like she was someone worth trusting. "I should go," she said, not moving. "Yeah." Neither of them moved. "Lucas, this is complicated," he said quickly. "Whatever this is, I'm your consultant. You're the CEO. Emma's involved now. There are about 17 kinds of professional boundaries we're crossing. I know. So we should probably stop before it gets more complicated." "Probably." He pushed off from the car. "Good night, Scarlett." "Good night." She drove home with her heart beating too fast and her mind full of all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Professional relationships, power dynamics, the fact that she was barely holding on to her job and didn't need another complication. But when she got home to her empty apartment with its expensive furniture and pristine silence, all she could think about was the warmth in Lucas's eyes when he talked about his daughter. The way he'd looked at her over ice cream like she was someone real, not just a CEO or a veil or a person who needed to maintain perfect composure at all times. She fell asleep thinking about possibility and woke up determined to keep things professional. The determination lasted exactly 3 days. The engineering team for Cornerstone expanded to 12 people as the pilot program ramped up. They took over half the 23rd floor, installing additional servers and workstations. The energy was electric, people working on something they believed in, building toward a vision instead of just maintaining the status quo. Scarlett found herself spending more time there than anywhere else. She'd tell herself she was monitoring the investment, ensuring the pilot stayed on track. But really, she was drawn to the creative chaos of it. The whiteboard arguments, the late-night breakthrough moments, the sense that they were building something that mattered. And Lucas. She was drawn to Lucas. It happened gradually, in moments too small to name individually. The way he explained complex technical concepts with patience instead of condescension. How he listened when she talked about board politics, offering insights that cut through the noise. The coffee he started bringing her without being asked, always exactly how she liked it, even though she'd never told him her order. One night, 2 weeks into the pilot program, everyone else had gone home except the two of them. They were in the lab, reviewing test results from the day's security audit. The audit had gone well, better than expected, actually, and they were both running on the adrenaline of success. "We're going to pull this off," Scarlett said, looking at the metrics on Lucas's screen. "We're actually going to build something revolutionary. Don't jinx it. We've still got 11 months to screw it up." Always the optimist. Always the realist. But he was smiling. They were standing close, both leaning over the same monitor. Scarlett was acutely aware of the warmth of him next to her, the smell of coffee, and the subtle scent of whatever soap he used. When he turned to look at her, their faces were inches apart. "Scarlett," he said quietly, "we should talk about this." "About what?" "About the fact that I can't stop thinking about you. About how every time you walk into a room, I lose my train of thought. About how working with you is the best part of my day, and that's not just about the project." Her breath caught. "Lucas, I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. I've listed them all to myself about 100 times. But I need to know if you feel it too, or if I'm just making this weird by myself." Scarlett should have said something professional, should have established boundaries, should have protected them both from the complications that would inevitably follow. Instead, she kissed him. It was brief, tentative, neither of them quite sure if they were making a catastrophic mistake. When they pulled apart, Lucas's eyes were wide with surprise. "That's not an answer," he said. "Yes, it is. A really complicated answer. Everything about us is complicated." He kissed her again, longer this time, with more certainty. When they finally broke apart, they were both slightly breathless and definitely crossing professional boundaries that couldn't be uncrossed. "We're going to have to tell HR," Scarlett said. "Yeah. And probably disclose it to the board." Probably. Thornton's going to have a field day with this. Definitely. So we're doing this anyway? Lucas took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I spent 8 months being angry and alone because I was too scared to trust anyone at Vantage Systems again. Then you showed up on my porch in the rain, looking exhausted and determined and like you actually gave a damn about something other than profit margins. I'm tired of being scared. I'm scared, Scarlett admitted. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, the company, the project, this, all of it. Then we'll mess it up together. They stood there in the empty lab, holding hands like teenagers, surrounded by the technology they were building and the future they were trying to create. It was reckless and complicated and absolutely the wrong time to be starting something personal. But for the first time since becoming CEO, Scarlett felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The disclosure to HR went about as awkwardly as expected. The representative, a kind woman named Maria, who'd probably dealt with worse workplace situations, listened to their explanation with professional neutrality. You understand, Maria said, that as CEO and consultant, there's an inherent power dynamic that creates potential concerns. We understand, Scarlett said, which is why we're disclosing it voluntarily and establishing clear boundaries. Lucas reports to me on project matters only. Any personal relationship exists separately from our professional roles. And if the relationship ends badly, Lucas and Scarlett looked at each other. They hadn't discussed contingencies. Probably should have. Then we're both adults who can maintain professional standards, Lucas said. I've worked with people I didn't like before. I can do it again if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Maria made some notes on her tablet. I'll need to file this with the board. They'll likely want to establish additional oversight to ensure there's no favoritism or ethical conflicts. We expected that, Scarlett said. One more thing. Maria looked at them both seriously. If this goes wrong, it won't just affect you two. It'll affect your teams, the project, the company culture, so please be sure this is worth the risk. After they left HR, Lucas turned to Scarlett in the hallway. Second thoughts? About 100. You? Constantly. But you're still here. So are you. They went back to work, trying to pretend everything was normal while being hyper-aware of every interaction, every word, every moment where personal and professional blurred together. It was exhausting and exhilarating and completely impossible to sustain long-term, which became clear when Emma asked the question neither of them had prepared for. It was a Friday evening, 3 weeks after their first kiss. Scarlett had started joining Lucas and Emma for dinner occasionally. Nothing formal, just takeout at Lucas's house while they reviewed project updates, and Emma showed off her latest robot modifications. They were sitting around the small kitchen table, eating Thai food straight from the containers, when Emma looked up from her pad Thai and asked, "Are you and Dad dating?" Lucas froze mid-bite. Scarlett nearly choked on her spring roll. "What makes you ask that?" Lucas said carefully. "You smile at each other a lot, and you hold hands sometimes when you think I'm not looking. And yesterday Tommy's mom asked if Miss Scarlett was my dad's girlfriend." "Tommy's mom should mind her own business," Lucas muttered. "So are you?" Emma persisted. "Dating?" Scarlett and Lucas looked at each other. They hadn't labeled it, hadn't defined what this was beyond complicated, and probably a terrible idea, but we're doing it anyway. "Yeah," Lucas said finally. "We are. Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this seriously. "Does this mean Scarlett's going to be around more?" "Maybe, if that's okay." "Can she help with my robot? The programming part is hard." Scarlett laughed, feeling tension drain away. "I'm terrible at programming, but I can try." "That's okay, Dad's good at it. You can just hang out." Emma went back to her noodles like this was settled. Tommy's mom is going to be so excited. She loves gossip. After dinner, after Emma had gone to bed, Lucas and Scarlett sat on the porch swing, not quite touching, but close enough that their shoulders brushed with each movement. "That went better than expected," Scarlett said. "She's 7. Everything's simple when you're 7. Adult dating her dad? Cool. More people to help with robots? Even better. I wish the board was that easy to convince." How'd they react to the HR disclosure? "Margaret thinks it's unprofessional, but understandable. Thomas doesn't care as long as the project stays on track. Thornton sent me an email that was 3 paragraphs of barely disguised threats about conflicts of interest. So, business as usual." "Pretty much." They rocked in silence for a while, listening to the neighborhood sounds. Someone's TV playing through an open window, a dog barking in the distance, the general hum of evening settling in. "My wife and I used to sit out here," Lucas said quietly, "before she got sick. She'd plan out her garden, decide what to plant where. Never actually got around to planting most of it, but she loved the planning." It was the first time he'd talked about his wife unprompted. Scarlett stayed quiet, giving him space. "She died 3 years ago, breast cancer. By the time they caught it, it had spread everywhere. We had 8 months from diagnosis to the end." His voice was steady but distant. "Emma barely remembers her. I show her pictures, tell her stories, try to keep the memory alive. But mostly, Emma just knows me. Just this. I'm sorry. Me too." He looked at her. "I'm not trying to compare or make this weird. I just want you to know that this, us, it's not something I'm doing lightly. I haven't dated anyone since she died. Didn't want to, didn't see the point. What changed? You showed up on my porch in the rain and refused to leave until I listened. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You built something worth believing in." He took her hand. "I'm done being angry at ghosts. I want to build something new." Scarlett leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "I don't know how to do this. The relationship part. I've always been terrible at it. Too focused on work, too competitive, too much of my father's daughter. Then we'll figure it out together, make mistakes, learn as we go." That sounds messy. Everything worth doing is messy. They sat on the swing until the night turned cold, talking about nothing and everything, building something fragile and real between them. Inside, Emma slept soundly, dreaming of robots and possibilities. And for the first time in years, the future felt less like a burden and more like a promise. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in late October, 6 months into the Cornerstone pilot program. Scarlett was in a breakfast meeting with potential investors when her phone started vibrating with such frequency that she had to excuse herself. 14 missed calls from David Chen, 23 texts from various department heads, and 1 email from Thornton with the subject line, "Emergency board meeting, immediate." She stepped into the hallway and called David. "Tell me what's happening." Someone leaked internal documents to TechCrunch, financial projections, development timelines, everything about Cornerstone. The article goes live in 2 hours, and it's not flattering. They're calling it Vantage Systems' $80 million gamble and questioning whether the technology is even viable. Scarlett felt the floor tilt beneath her. "How did they get internal documents?" "We don't know yet. But Thornton's already calling for your resignation. He's convinced the board you've lost control of the company." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She made it in 15, arriving to find the executive floor in controlled chaos. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering. She could feel eyes following her as she walked to the boardroom, could sense the shift in energy that happened when leadership was vulnerable. The board was already assembled, all 12 members looking grim. Thornton stood at the head of the table like he'd already assumed control. "There she is," he said as Scarlett entered. "The CEO, who's been too busy playing house with her consultant to notice someone's bleeding our company's secrets to the press." "That's enough, Richard," Margaret said sharply, but even she looked troubled. Scarlett took her seat, keeping her expression neutral despite the rage building in her chest. "I've read the article preview. It's full of speculation and half-truths. We can issue a response. A response won't fix the fact that someone in your inner circle sold us out," Thornton interrupted. "This leak came from inside Cornerstone, your pet project, the one you've been pouring millions into while the rest of the company suffers. The rest of the company isn't suffering. Our Q3 earnings were up 18% because we're riding on infrastructure that Lucas Reed built for free after you publicly humiliated us." Thornton leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Let's be honest about what's happening here, Scarlett. You've prioritized your personal relationship and your vanity project over the actual business of running this company, and now it's blowing up in your face. My personal relationship has nothing to do with this leak." "Doesn't it? You've given Reed unprecedented access to sensitive information. You've built an entire team around him with minimal oversight. You've been so focused on playing house that you've ignored basic security protocols." Scarlett felt her control slipping. "Lucas would never—" "You don't know that. You're sleeping with him. You can't be objective." The room went silent. Patricia Wells cleared her throat uncomfortably. Thomas Wu studied his hands. Even Margaret looked away. That's a serious accusation, Scarlett said quietly, dangerously. Do you have any evidence that Lucas is responsible for the leak? I have evidence that he's the only person with access to all the leaked documents. I have evidence that he was fired from this company once before for insubordination. And I have evidence that you've been too blinded by personal feelings to see the obvious. The obvious being? That Reed is playing you. That he's been playing you from the start. Think about it, Scarlett. He shows up at exactly the right moment with a mysterious blueprint that saves the company. He accepts a consultant position with unusual terms. He starts a relationship with the CEO. And now, when Cornerstone is about to go into full funding review, someone leaks information that makes the whole project look like a disaster. Thornton smiled coldly. That's not coincidence, that's sabotage. You're wrong. Am I? Then explain to me how those documents got to TechCrunch. Explain how someone bypassed all our security measures to access confidential files. Explain. I can explain it, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Lucas stood there looking like he'd dressed in a hurry. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and his expression was absolutely furious. Mr. Reed, Thornton said smoothly. How convenient. We were just discussing. I heard what you were discussing. Your assistant has a loud voice and thin walls. Lucas walked into the room holding a tablet. You want to know who leaked those documents? It was Marcus Wu. The room erupted. Scarlett felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus? The engineer who'd stayed behind to work on Cornerstone? Who'd been with them from the beginning? That's absurd, Patricia said. Marcus has been with this company for 8 years, and he's been talking to Databridge Analytics for the past 3 months. Lucas pulled up files on his tablet, projecting them onto the boardroom screen. I noticed unusual access patterns in our secure servers 2 weeks ago. Someone was copying files during off hours, routing the transfers through VPN servers to hide the origin. I've been tracking it, trying to figure out who and why. And you didn't think to mention this? Thornton demanded. I mentioned it to David Chen and our security team. We've been conducting a quiet investigation. I didn't want to alert whoever was responsible before we had proof. Lucas pulled up more files. Marcus has been in contact with a Databridge executive named Chen Wei. Same last name, probably related. They've been offering him a position as their chief technology officer in exchange for intelligence on our development pipeline. Scarlett stared at the evidence on the screen. Email chains, file access logs, wire transfers to Marcus's personal account. It was all there, damning and irrefutable. Why would Marcus do this? She asked quietly. Because Databridge offered him triple his current salary and equity in a competitor. Lucas's voice was hard. And because he's been angry since I recommended Sarah Park for the lead architect position on Cornerstone instead of him. He felt passed over, undervalued. So when Databridge came calling, he sold us out. Margaret leaned forward, studying the evidence. This is solid. We need to terminate Marcus immediately and pursue legal action. Already done, David Chen said, appearing in the doorway. Security just escorted him out of the building. Legal is preparing a lawsuit for breach of contract and theft of trade secrets. Well, Thornton said after a long moment, this is certainly embarrassing. For you, you mean? Lucas turned to face him. You just spent 20 minutes accusing me of sabotage based on nothing but your personal dislike and your assumption that someone like me couldn't possibly be trustworthy. You tried to destroy my reputation again because it was convenient for your political agenda. I was looking at the evidence. You were looking for a scapegoat, the same way Hammond looked for one when I questioned his data monetization scheme. The same way this company has always operated, protecting the powerful and sacrificing whoever's convenient. Lucas looked at Scarlett. I need to talk to you, privately. They left the boardroom and went to her office. Lucas paced while Scarlett stood by the window, trying to process everything that had just happened. I'm sorry, she said finally. I should have defended you better. I should have shut Thornton down the moment he started accusing you. You were blindsided, we both were. Lucas stopped pacing and looked at her. But this is exactly what I was afraid of. The moment something goes wrong, they're going to blame me. They're going to use our relationship as evidence that you're compromised. And they're not entirely wrong. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe Thornton had a point. Not about me being a saboteur, but about us being too close to see clearly. You didn't want to believe Marcus could betray us because he was part of the team. I didn't want to alarm you with suspicions I couldn't prove. We're making decisions based on personal feelings instead of strategic thinking. Scarlett felt cold. You want to end this? I want to protect what we've built, both of us. Cornerstone is too important to be derailed by board politics and relationship drama. So what do you suggest? Lucas was quiet for a long moment. I think I need to step back from the consultant role, stay on as a technical advisor, but at a distance. Let someone else run the day-to-day operations. That's insane. You're the only one who fully understands the architecture. Sarah Park understands it almost as well as I do, and she doesn't come with the baggage I do. She can lead the team without giving Thornton ammunition to use against you. And us? He looked at her and she saw the conflict in his eyes. I don't know. Maybe we need to put that on hold too. At least until Cornerstone is fully approved and implemented. Until your position as CEO is more secure. I don't want to put us on hold. Neither do I. But I also don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. Scarlett crossed to him, taking his hands. Listen to me. I've spent my entire life making decisions based on what other people thought was appropriate, playing by rules designed to protect the status quo. And where did it get me? Running a company I inherited instead of built, following in my father's footsteps instead of making my own path. She squeezed his hands. Meeting you changed that. You showed me what it looks like to refuse to compromise on things that matter. I'm not going to start compromising now. Even if it costs you your job? Even then. Because what's the point of having this job if I have to pretend to be someone I'm not? Lucas pulled her into a hug, and they stood there for a long moment, holding on to each other while the storm raged outside her office door. We're going to have to fight, he said quietly. Thornton's not going to let this go. He'll find other ways to come after us. Let him try. But as they separated and Scarlett returned to face the board, she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The battle lines were drawn now. Thornton on one side, determined to remove her from power, her on the other, fighting not just for her position, but for the right to live her life on her own terms. The TechCrunch article published at noon. It was as bad as David had warned, full of leaked financials, skeptical quotes from anonymous board members, and speculation that Cornerstone was a vanity project doomed to fail. Within hours, the stock dropped 12%. Shareholders started calling for explanations. Competitors began circling, sensing weakness. Scarlett spent the afternoon in damage control meetings, issuing statements, reassuring investors, trying to contain the bleeding. By 6 p.m., she was exhausted and angry and seriously questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Lucas found her in her office at 8, staring blankly at her computer screen. Emma's with a babysitter, he said. I told her I had to work late. Which is technically true. You should go home. Spend time with your daughter. This mess will still be here tomorrow. So will you. He pulled up a chair and sat down. I've been thinking about Thornton's accusations, about why he's so determined to see me as the enemy. Because he's an insecure man who can't stand anyone challenging his authority? Partly, but also because I represent everything he's afraid of. I'm proof that the old way of doing business, protecting corrupt executives, burying inconvenient truths, prioritizing profit over people, doesn't work anymore. As long as I'm here, I'm a reminder that he and Hammond and everyone like them were wrong. Scarlett leaned back in her chair. So what do? We prove them wrong, publicly, definitively. Lucas pulled out his tablet and showed her a document. I've been working on a response to the TechCrunch article, not defensive or apologetic, just facts. What Cornerstone is, what it does, why it matters, and a challenge. What kind of challenge? We invite independent security experts to audit the system, give them full access, let them test it, try to break it, publish their findings, complete transparency. That's risky. If they find vulnerabilities, they will. No system is perfect, but we'll fix them publicly, showing exactly how we respond to problems. We turn the skepticism into an opportunity to prove we're serious about security and accountability. Scarlett read through his proposal. It was audacious and terrifying and exactly the kind of bold move that would either save them or destroy them completely. Thornton will say we're being reckless. Thornton says that about everything we do. At some point, we have to stop caring what he thinks. The board might not approve it. Then we do it anyway and ask for forgiveness later. Scarlett looked at him, this man who'd been broken by her company and had somehow found the courage to believe in it again. "You're a terrible influence. You know that, right? You're the one who showed up on my porch and wouldn't leave. This is your fault." She smiled despite everything. "Okay, let's do it. Full transparency. Independent audit. Show everyone we have nothing to hide." They spent the next 3 hours refining the proposal, crafting the public announcement, coordinating with the communications team. By the time they finished, it was past 11 and the building was empty except for security guards and the cleaning crew. "I should go," Lucas said, gathering his things. "Babysitter charges extra after midnight. Thank you for today, for all of this. Thank you for not listening to Thornton when he told you to fire me." I considered it for about 30 seconds. 30 seconds? That long? She threw a stress ball at him. He caught it, grinning, and the moment felt so normal and ordinary that Scarlett almost forgot about the crisis surrounding them. Almost. The independent security audit was announced the next morning. The response was immediate and polarized. Tech media praised it as a bold move toward transparency. Competitors mocked it as a desperate publicity stunt. The board split along predictable lines, Margaret and Thomas supporting it, Thornton calling it reckless, the others waiting to see which way the political winds blew. 3 security firms agreed to participate in the audit. All were well respected. All had reputations for being thorough and unforgiving. They were given 4 weeks to test Cornerstone from every angle, with permission to publish their findings regardless of what they discovered. Lucas threw himself into preparation, working 18-hour days to ensure the system could withstand the scrutiny. Sarah Park took over more of the team leadership, proving that Lucas had been right about her capabilities. The rest of the Cornerstone engineers rallied, understanding that their work was about to be judged by some of the harshest critics in the industry. Scarlett watched from a distance, managing board politics and investor relations, while Lucas did what he did best, building something that could survive any test thrown at it. They saw each other less during those 4 weeks. Brief meetings to coordinate strategy, occasional late-night calls when one of them couldn't sleep. But the easy intimacy they'd been developing was put on hold, replaced by professional distance born from necessity rather than choice. Emma noticed. "Dad sat again," she told Scarlett one afternoon when Scarlett stopped by to drop off some documents Lucas had requested. Emma was in the living room, working on her robot, which now had 7 legs instead of 6 and could apparently walk in circles. "What makes you think he's sad?" "He does the dishes really slowly. That's what he does when he's thinking about Mom and missing her. But he's not thinking about Mom this time. He's thinking about you." Scarlett sat down on the couch, watching Emma carefully attach a wire to one of the robot's legs. "Your dad and I are just trying to focus on work right now. There's a lot happening." "I know. Tommy's mom says you're going to get fired and then Dad will be sad again and we'll have to move because he won't have a job." "Tommy's mom needs to stop gossiping." "That's what Dad said." Emma looked up, her expression serious beyond her years. "Are you going to break up with him?" "I don't want to. But maybe you have to?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." Emma considered this, then went back to her robot. "Mom used to say that the hard thing and the right thing are usually the same thing. I didn't understand what she meant, but Dad explained it. It means sometimes you have to do stuff that feels bad because it's what you're supposed to do." "Your mom sounds like she was very wise. Dad says I'm like her, smart and stubborn." Emma activated her robot, which immediately tipped over and lay there waving its legs helplessly. "Okay, maybe not that smart. This thing doesn't work at all." Scarlett helped her troubleshoot the balance issue, and they spent the next hour adjusting the robot's center of gravity until it could walk in a relatively straight line. By the time Lucas got home, the robot was doing figure eights in the living room, and Emma was convinced she was going to be a robotics engineer when she grew up. "Look what it can do," Emma demonstrated proudly while Lucas watched with an expression that was equal parts exhausted and delighted. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Did you figure out the balance problem?" Scarlett helped. "She's actually really good at physics, even though she says she's not." Lucas looked at Scarlett, something soft and complicated in his eyes. "She's good at a lot of things." After Emma went to bed, they sat on the porch swing in silence. The Seattle autumn was settling in, leaves turning gold and red, the air carrying a bite that promised winter wasn't far off. 4 more days until the audit results are published," Lucas said. "I know." And then we'll know if everything we've built can survive scrutiny. It will. I believe in it. In you. Even if it doesn't, even if they find critical flaws, it was worth trying. That's what I keep telling myself. Scarlett took his hand. When this is over, the audit, the board politics, all of it, I want to take you and Emma somewhere, just for a weekend. Somewhere that's not Seattle and not work and not crisis management. Like where? I don't know. The ocean? The mountains? Anywhere that's just us being normal people instead of CEO and consultant. I'd like that. He squeezed her hand. Assuming we both still have jobs. Even if we don't. They sat in the cooling night air, holding hands and trying not to think about the 100 ways everything could fall apart in the next few days. The audit results were published on a Friday morning. Scarlett was in her office when the email came through. She opened it with hands that shook slightly, reading through the executive summary while her heart hammered in her chest. The auditors had found vulnerabilities. 7 of them, ranging from minor to moderately serious. But they'd also found something else. She read the conclusion 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. Then she called an emergency board meeting. An hour later, the board was assembled. Thornton looked smug, clearly expecting vindication. Margaret looked cautious. The others waited to see which way the winds would blow. The audit results are in, Scarlett said, projecting the report onto the screen. The security firms found 7 vulnerabilities in Cornerstone's architecture. 3 minor, 4 moderate. Nothing critical, nothing unfixable. So your $80 million system is fundamentally flawed, Thornton said. Exactly as I predicted. Actually, no. Scarlett pulled up the next section of the report. The auditors compared Cornerstone's security profile to every other major cloud infrastructure provider. Every single one had more vulnerabilities than we did. Most had critical flaws that had existed for years without being addressed. She let that sink in. The auditor's conclusion is that Cornerstone represents the most secure cloud infrastructure system currently available. Not perfect, but better than anything else on the market by a significant margin. The room was silent. Furthermore, Scarlett continued, all 3 security firms have requested meetings to discuss licensing our technology for their own systems. We've already received preliminary offers totaling over $200 million for partial licensing agreements. Thornton's expression shifted from smug to stunned. So here's what I'm proposing, Scarlett said. We move forward with full implementation of Cornerstone. We fix the identified vulnerabilities publicly, showing our commitment to continuous improvement. We explore the licensing opportunities, which could generate significant revenue. And we position Vantage Systems as the industry leader in secure, privacy-focused cloud infrastructure. That's assuming the board approves full funding, Thornton said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I move to approve, Margaret said immediately. Second, Thomas added, the vote was 9-3 in favor. Even some of Thornton's usual allies had abandoned him, seeing the commercial opportunity that Cornerstone represented. After the meeting, Scarlett went straight to the Cornerstone lab. The entire team was gathered around monitors, reading through the audit results with expressions ranging from relief to triumph. Lucas stood at the center of it all, looking exhausted but satisfied. When he saw Scarlett, he excused himself from the celebration and met her in the hallway. We did it, she said. You did it. You fought for this when everyone said it was impossible. We did it together. She wanted to kiss him, to celebrate properly, but they were still in the office and maintaining professional boundaries in front of the team. The board approved full funding, $80 million over 3 years, just like we originally proposed. And Thornton? Voted against it, but he didn't have the support. The commercial opportunities are too significant for even his allies to ignore. Lucas leaned against the wall, looking like the weight he'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. So what happens now? Now we build it for real. Full implementation, company-wide rollout, everything we've been working toward. That's going to take years. I know. And it's going to be hard, probably harder than the pilot program. I know that too. But we're doing it anyway. We're doing it anyway. They stood in the hallway while celebration sounds drifted from the lab. 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of corporate corruption and built something worth protecting. About us, Lucas said carefully. About what we put on hold. What about it? I don't want it on hold anymore. I don't want to wait until everything's perfect or secure or politically convenient. I want to be with you. Emma wants you around, and life's too short to keep putting off the things that actually matter. Scarlett felt something tight in her chest loosen. Thornton's going to make our lives difficult. He already does. The board will use it against us whenever something goes wrong. They'll find ways to do that anyway. So we're really doing this? Relationship and professional partnership and all the complications that come with it? Lucas smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Yeah, we're really doing this. Okay then. Scarlett took his hand, not caring who saw. Let's go celebrate with your team, our team, and then let's take Emma out for ice cream and tell her that the sad dishes phase is officially over. They walked back into the lab together, greeted by cheers and congratulations from engineers who'd bet their careers on a vision of something better. The celebration lasted until late evening, everyone too wired from success and relief to want to go home. But eventually, people started drifting away, heading back to their lives outside the office. Scarlett and Lucas were among the last to leave, turning off lights and locking doors and making sure everything was secure for the weekend. In the parking garage, under fluorescent lights that flickered slightly, Scarlett stopped Lucas before he could get into his car. Thank you, she said, for taking a chance on me, on us, on all of this. Thank you for being stubborn enough to keep showing up on my porch until I listened. I'm good at stubborn. I've noticed. They kissed in the parking garage like teenagers, making up for weeks of professional distance and careful restraint. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lucas was grinning. Emma's with the babysitter for another hour, he said. Want to grab coffee? Actual coffee, not crisis management coffee? I would love actual coffee. They went to a place near his house, one of those neighborhood spots that stayed open late for students and insomniacs and people who needed a third place that wasn't work or home. They sat by the window watching the street outside, talking about everything except vantage systems and board politics and the massive project they'd just committed to building. Tell me something I don't know about you, Lucas said. Like what? Anything. Favorite food, embarrassing childhood story, secret talent, something that's just you, not CEO you. Scarlett thought about it. I wanted to be a writer when I was younger, before my father decided I was going into business. I used to fill notebooks with stories about people going on adventures, discovering new worlds, being anyone except themselves. Do you still write? No, haven't in years. It felt like admitting defeat, giving up on business to chase something impractical. That's sad. Yeah, it kind of is. She took a sip of her coffee. What about you? What did you want to be before you became an engineer? A teacher, like my dad. He taught high school physics and made it seem like magic. I wanted to do that too. Why didn't you? Money, mostly. Teaching doesn't pay much, and I had student loans and then a family to support. Engineering was practical, but sometimes I miss the idea of it. Helping people understand complicated things. Making knowledge accessible instead of exclusive. You do that now. With your team. With Emma. It's not the same. Maybe not, but it matters. They talked until this coffee shop started closing down around them, the barista wiping down tables with the patient resignation of someone used to late-night stragglers. Outside, Seattle had settled into its late-night rhythm. Sparse traffic, occasional pedestrians, the quiet that came after the city had stopped trying so hard. When they finally left, Lucas walked Scarlett to her car. The autumn air was cold enough to see their breath, the sky clear enough to see stars despite the city lights. I'm glad you didn't give up on me, Lucas said, back when I slammed the door in your face. You could have walked away, found someone else to fix your crisis. But you kept coming back. I'm stubborn, remember? Yeah, but it's more than that. You saw something worth fighting for when everyone else just saw problems to manage. That takes vision and courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Scarlett unlocked her car but didn't get in yet. We're going to have more fights with the board, more crises, more people trying to tear down what we're building. I know. And we're probably going to make mistakes, personally and professionally. We'll fight, we'll disappoint each other, we'll wonder if we're doing the right thing. Also know that. So why does this feel like the beginning of something instead of the middle of a disaster? Lucas pulled her close, his arms warm against the cold night. Because for the first time in a long time, we're building something that doesn't require us to compromise who we are. We're not perfect. We're probably going to screw this up in new and creative ways, but we're trying to do it right." They stood there in the parking lot, holding each other while the city moved around them, two people who'd found something worth protecting in the wreckage of corporate warfare. And for tonight, in this moment, that was enough. 2 years later, Scarlett stood in the boardroom presenting quarterly results. Cornerstone was running at full capacity. 8.2 billion secure transactions, 0 breaches, 94% client retention. The licensing deals brought in 300 million annually. Thornton was gone, forced out by shareholders. The new board members actually cared about innovation over politics. After the meeting, she found Lucas on the 23rd floor helping a junior engineer debug code. Emma sat nearby, now 9, working on a space exploration game for her computer club. "Board went well," Scarlett said. "Margaret suggested spinning off into our own company." Lucas looked up. "What did you say?" "That we'd think about it, but honestly, we've got something good. Small enough to stay honest, big enough to matter." Emma interrupted without looking up from her screen. "Dad says you're thinking about getting married." Scarlett froze. Lucas's ears went red. "Emma, that was private. You said it while I was in the room. That's not private." Emma looked at Scarlett seriously. "If you are, I want to be a bridesmaid. Tommy's sister got to wear a fancy dress." "We're figuring things out," Scarlett managed. "Well, hurry up. I'm not getting any younger." Lucas grabbed his coat. "Break time. Emma, save your work." They walked to the waterfront, watching Emma chase seagulls while ferries crossed Elliott Bay. "Sorry about that," Lucas said. "We talked about the future last night. She has opinions." "She's 9. Of course she does." Scarlett smiled. "For what it's worth, I've been thinking about it too." "Yeah?" "What we've built, professionally and personally, it feels permanent, worth protecting." Lucas took her hand. "We built more than a security system. We built a company that doesn't require compromising values, a team that trusts each other, a life that works. It's not perfect. We still fight about work-life balance. The new board members still make comments about us. But we're happy, in the imperfect, complicated way real people are." "Yeah, we are." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, still arguing about learning quantum physics, they sat on the porch swing. "I meant what I said," Lucas said quietly, "about making this permanent." "I know." He pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple ring, no massive diamond, just elegant and honest. "I was going to plan something elaborate," he said, "but that's not us." "No," Scarlett agreed, taking the ring. "It's not." "I didn't actually ask yet." "You were going to. The answer is yes." They sat together, engaged and certain. Inside, Emma's 7-legged robot finally worked. Down the street, neighbors settled in for the night. Across the city, Vantage systems ran on infrastructure built with integrity instead of compromise. The company that erased Lucas now bore his fingerprint on every system. The woman who inherited corruption had rebuilt something worth leading. The girl who lost her mother had gained a family that chose each other daily. It wasn't perfect. There would be more fights, more crises, more doubt. But they'd face it together, building something that mattered one decision at a time. And that was the only kind of ending worth having, messy, real, and built on the truth that doing right by people always matters more than protecting power. Some stories don't end with triumph. They end with the quiet resolution to keep building, keep trying, keep showing up for the work and the people who depend on you. This was one of those stories. And it was enough.